This is Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
Hey, what's going on, gang? Welcome back to another edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Great to have you with us. Andrew Paterson, along with Michael Remis. And 'twas the night before the National Hockey League draft. Well, first round at least, of course, that gets going tomorrow in Montreal. We'll head to Montreal a little bit later on, connect with Mike McIntyre of the Winnipeg Free Press. NHL GM meetings happening today. Kevin Cheveldayoff will speak a little later on this afternoon as well. And we'll also head east and get Grant McCagg from Recrutes.ca for his thoughts heading into tomorrow's round one of the NHL Draft. Of course, don't forget the Jets are picking not once but twice. Thank you, New York Rangers. The Jets will have their own pick at 14th overall, and we'll also have the 30th pick in the NHL Draft, thanks to the Rangers moving on to the third round of the playoffs. So 14 and 30 as of right now for the Winnipeg Jets. And who knows, potential player moves that could happen, as early as today or tomorrow heading into the draft. But, with everyone together, the GMs meeting today, there's plenty of trade talk around the league, and we'll get to some of those trade rumors coming up in just a few minutes. So Mike McIntyre and Grant on the National Hockey League in the draft. And before we do that, we're going to welcome in one of our all-time favorites, TSN's Rod Smith, who called the Bomber Argo game on Monday night. We'll talk a little bit more about that wild one on Monday. Get Rod's thoughts on the landscape of the Canadian Football League right now, with the big boys playing in the West and the JV division being the East so far this season, certainly when you look at the standings. And we'll get his thoughts on the heavyweight tilt Saturday night, 6 p.m., the 4-0 Bombers and the 3-0 British Columbia Lions, led by Canadian quarterbacking phenom Nathan Rourke. So big show coming up today. Do want to thank all the sponsors that make this program happen each and every day, including F Apparel, Vita Health, Aikens Lake, Wallace & Wallace, Culligan Water, Manitoba Battery, Royal Sports, Breezy Bend, Not Auto Corp, Little Brown Jug, Princess Auto, BP, Nick and Nicky DQ, Assiniboia Downs, Canadian Club Whiskey, and of course our betting partner over at Coolbet Canada. Let's get Michael Remis in here and get this show on the road. What's going on?
Feeling good, Huss. It's busy week, draft week, transaction week, trade rumor week. There's so much stuff going on in the NHL, but also we have CFL kicking off. We're excited to have Rod Smith on later, and the Bombers at 4-0. So lots to get to, but a very exciting week in terms of NHL rumors and transactions.
Hey, speaking of transactions, we have a trade to announce, not in the NHL, but just in the past half hour or so, a pretty significant NFL move, which we'll just quickly touch on. Baker Mayfield, the former number 1 overall pick of the Cleveland Browns, is on his way to the Carolina Panthers for a conditional 5th-round pick. It sounds like both sides worked out some financial arrangements to allow Mayfield to go from Cleveland to Carolina. And Remo, just what's interesting about this trade is that I thought that there would be some takers for Baker Mayfield. I mean, certainly he'd be better than anyone on Seattle's roster right now. He'd be an improvement in Carolina, where he's ended up. But I thought that a lot of it kind of was dealing, with the uncertainty as to whether Deshaun Watson could be suspended for part or all of the upcoming season. We don't have any clarity. There were some rumors that he was going to be suspended last Friday heading into the long weekend. That has not happened as of yet. That being said, Baker gets a fresh start, and Carolina Panthers fans will certainly hope that he'll do a bit better than another reclamation project at center in Sam Darnold, who really struggled last year.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised they ended up dealing him just because the uncertainty with Deshaun Watson. But all right, we'll see what happens there. And I think good for Carolina, and hopefully he does work out better than Sam Darnold. So I think DJ Moore, if you're playing fantasy, bump him up a little bit, and hopefully it works out for Baker.
I'll say this, and Andy McNamara is a great friend of ours and comes on occasionally throughout the NFL season, is like a Browns dog pound diehard. If you talk to people around Cleveland, Baker played through, some really bad injuries last year. There were some times where he was in the game and he couldn't even throw the football. So I still don't really understand how they managed him last year. It sounds like there's some issues behind the scenes. But as it works with the Cleveland Browns, there's always issues behind the scenes. And even with Baker gone, they've got plenty to deal with when it comes to the quarterback they gave so much to get and invested over $240 million in Deshaun Watson. So we'll see whether he can play this season. That being said, we'll have more time for NFL in the next couple of weeks when training camps get going and things are a little quieter around the National Hockey League's offseason. But things are heating up today, Reem, and this day today in particular, one of the more interesting ones because, of course, the National Hockey League general managers are together. Lots of face-to-face conversations. I imagine there's been a ton of work done on potential deals leading up to right now. And we certainly are expecting some significant player movement around the league heading into Thursday night and throughout the weekend.
Yeah, Frank Saravalli had his updated trade targets today, but a lot of the names you keep reading about. JT Miller, I saw Darren Dreger tweeting about him. He seems like he could be on the move. The Oilers are ready to part ways with Jesse Puljujarvi. I think Rashog was tweeting that, and he's up on the trade targets list. So I'm curious to see what's going there. I think he would be a good fit for the Jets. Jacob Chitrin was another one who was mentioned by Pierre and Darren Dreger. So will we see moves, or is it all talk? I'm not sure, but usually draft day there are moves being made. And as for the Jets, Murat mentioned this yesterday on this show, and he put it in his column today. Seems like the Jets and Blake Wheeler are mutual, conscious uncoupling? Is that the term that you want to use there, where they're ready to part ways? And
they're breaking up.
They're breaking. They mutually decide, maybe this isn't going to work anymore. And Brenden Dillon is the name. We've said they need to move a veteran defenseman, and Murat said Dillon yesterday and wrote it in his column today that it seems like he's more likely than not to be the one. And will it happen before the draft, or will it happen closer to free agency? Now, the Jets did get, 2 seconds? They gave 2 seconds for Brenden Dillon. Could they get back? Or I think you'd look to trade him for, Jesse Puljujarvi type. But I know a lot of people have been weighing in for the last couple of months. Which defenseman do you trade? And it seems like Dillon is the odd man out in this game of musical chairs.
Yeah, and throw it in the chat for those of you that are with us on YouTube right now. Listen, how do you feel about a potential trade of Brenden Dillon? Listen, I love Brenden Dillon as the player. I think he brings a lot to the Winnipeg Jets that this team needs. But the one thing that they absolutely need to do is make some room on that blue line for Dylan Samberg, for Ville Heinola. And, Brenden Dillon's contract at less than $4 million for 2 more years, I think with what he brings to the table is very attractive. Now, will you have a drop-off in some aspects? Yeah, potentially. But the other thing is if you're able to move him, especially for picks, and not bring anything back certainly onto the blue line, it does give you a lot more flexibility when it comes to free agency and adding more players. Because I think that the bottom 6 especially is going to look significantly different next year. I think I'd assume Adam Lowry will be the centerpiece of a checking line under Rick Bowness. I think Mason Appleton will certainly be given the opportunity to, continue riding shotgun with Lowry. Who that third person as part of the group is, I guess we will see. I do think David Gustafsson, I'm hoping David Gustafsson gets a legitimate opportunity to play a regular shift in the bottom 6 to begin. But other than that, there's a lot of questions. And you can think about the RFAs, including a guy like Svechnikov, PLD. We know that, barring any sort of a trade, he'll be back likely on a 1-year deal, and we'll go through all of this again next season with 1 year remaining on his deal. But the ability to have a cheaper blue line and play some of those young players, I think gives Kevin Cheveldayoff far more options when it comes to potential trades and what you're going to bring back to bolster the forward group, or just simply moving on from salary and, giving yourself a little bit more wiggle room when it comes to free agents. That's the Brenden Dillon side of things. And I think it's pretty obvious, if things point to him just because of the ability to trade him. Dylan DeMello would be in that mix as well, but I don't think they want to trade him. He's fit so well with Josh Morrissey playing, relatively good value at $3 million with the effects that he's had on his partners. And it just seems to think that the ability to trade a player, I know a lot of people will be saying Nate Schmidt. Listen, I love having Nate Schmidt around, but at just south of $6 million, he is a player that is probably more difficult to move. So to your point, Remo, a lot of things showing, a lot of things kind of pointing to Brenden Dillon. And then, of course, the other big topic is the captain, Blake Wheeler. And the Wheeler situation's fascinating for so many reasons. You've mentioned the breakup. It certainly does sound like both player and team are willing to move. Now, Wheeler's contract went from a full no move to a 5-team no trade list, or 5 teams that he could be traded to. But the fact of the matter is that if he wants out, that list is probably significantly bigger. The biggest question for me, Raymond, we've been talking about it with our guests all week, is what does a Blake Wheeler trade look like, regardless of where he goes to? Are you getting much back? Are you giving up an asset to take the full contract, or do the Winnipeg Jets eat a significant amount of salary, potentially up to 50%, to make it a much more palatable deal for the team getting Wheeler, as well as maybe getting a more significant return back for the Jets captain?
Yeah, Murat did write that the Jets aren't looking to, include what we've come calling it a sweetener here, like a, Hainala or Sandberg in with a Wheeler deal. So you'd probably be looking to eat some salary. And I agree. I think at, $4 million or whatever it would be, he's a pretty productive player. He can play in the middle six. I don't think anyone's arguing with the production. And you're not trading him because, he hasn't produced for you, but it's just time for a culture change with the Jets. And seemingly the rumor mill would suggest they have both agreed on that. I think parting with Brenden Dillon, I think that's really tough. I mean, he came in, made an impact day one in training camp, laying the body. He's a big guy. But in terms of tradability, I mean, he's probably your most tradable D-man, him or Dylan DeMello. Nate Schmidt, he's going to be tough to move. 3 years, $6 million or 5.95. And Neil Pionk's got 3 more years, 5.8. Just had a really down season. Josh Morrissey's not going anywhere. So you're really looking at 2 guys, and you need to move them so you can free up space for Sandberg, Hainala, maybe even Chisholm. You also have Logan Stanley in there. I'm curious where he fits in on the roster next year. But you need to move some of that salary that's dedicated on your defense so you can bring some help in on forward. And $3.9 million, decent salary. So maybe someone will take that on. And you hope that Dylan Sandberg can be that big guy who replaces him. And it seemed like last year that he could definitely step in and play. So I know there's people in chat disappointed to lose Dylan, but you hope you can get back what you gave up for him, and then reallocate that to the forward group. So we'll reserve judgment until we see what happens. These are just rumors being speculated on, but I think we've been talking for months that you have to move AD and bring some of that salary to forward.
I would be fine if they were able to move 2, to be perfectly honest. I do think that, I think that the spots are there. Now, and again, I say move 2 of that veteran core. I guess Logan Stanley would be a name. Listen, where the organization would be into that or not, I'm really not sure. I think they've put a lot into Logan, and it was part of the reason why the expectations and hope for him were so high going into last season. But listen, he struggled last year. I don't think there's any way to sugarcoat it. I thought that he played quite well in his true rookie season. And I'd been mentioning for months, I thought the Winnipeg Jets were going to protect him because they didn't want to lose him, and they knew that he'd be picked, and that was the case. But things are a little bit different right now. And one of the biggest differences is that you have the likes of all these talented young defensemen knocking on the door or trying to barge right through the door and play regular roles. So I don't think that there would be any question that there'd be a taker for Logan Stanley at his age with the package that he brings. I'm not sure that the Winnipeg Jets would really would want to stomach that. I mean, you really do look at, Josh Morrissey's not going anywhere. We mentioned Dylan DeMello. And I think a Neil Pionk potential trade would sort of be selling low on a guy that had played so well in the past. And I guess this also comes back to the big question about, this new coaching staff, Remis. How the Winnipeg Jets can get a much better performance from a number of those same players. And we'll see who the defense coach is. We've heard Nolan Baumgartner being rumored to be a part of it. Certainly Scott Arniel will have a hand in that, as will Rick Bowness. And, if they can get better performance and have the forwards buy in and make everybody better, I think that's maybe the first task at hand. And certainly Bones did a heck of a job in getting the buy-in from people from the players in Dallas to do exactly that. So questions about the future of Blake Wheeler, what that trade looks like, what defenseman may be moved, could it be more than one? All of that up in the air. And all of this at the same time, Remo, that the NHL general managers, as we mentioned, will be sitting down together face to face. And I will tell you, having done a number of drafts, it's fascinating to be hanging out outside the general managers meetings. Gary and I did a number of shows where we'd be there. Then the doors open and they all come out. They sort of breaking out into groups. The insiders are sniffing around trying to hear what guys are talking about. And then as soon as guys break out, they'll kind of go up and say, "Oh, what were you guys talking about?" It's fascinating to see the insider game in person. But I wouldn't at all be surprised, as I mentioned right off the top of the program, if even later on today we start hearing about some moves. And a lot of intrigue, actually, especially near the top of the draft, as to whether some of the top picks could be moved. We've heard the New Jersey Devils number 2 pick could very well be up in the air. They've had, a 2 number 1 overalls so far. They've had the great fortune of moving up in the draft to number 2 today. And knowing the Philadelphia Flyers and how impatient in general that franchise is, do they make a big run at Johnny Gaudreau as a free agent? Do they trade their high first-rounder pick for a potential more star player right now? It certainly could happen. And the name that we're hearing the most, certainly from Frank, is JT Miller, who, the Canucks would love to keep him long-term, but with a year left on his deal, he is eligible to sign an extension on the 13th of July. He's a relative bargain at $5.25 million, and he's coming off a 99-point season. Now might be the time where the Canucks move on from JT Miller for what I would imagine would be a real significant haul.
Yeah, Frank put out his trade targets list, and I just want to give it. I've only been to one draft, the one in Minnesota, 2011, and it was pretty cool seeing all the GMs there. I remember the Montreal GM had huge scrums around them. It was the first Jets one, so it was pretty exciting for me.
Wasn't Bergevin back then? Every time we've seen Bergevin, he is like the fashion plate. He's rolling around. He's got these super, like this medium shirt, showing off the guns, no jacket to make sure everyone knows who's boss. It's a fascinating group to see coming out with so many shapes and sizes, if you will.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So we'll have to make a WST road trip to one of these days. But we are here now following all the rumors. And yeah, Frank had his new trade targets list where there are changes. And as you said, JT Miller and Darren Dreger reported that he's likely with Vancouver. I mean, they've been kind of a mess the last couple of years. They're trying to contend with a rebuilding roster. They're making horrible free agent signings. And then as those signings are about to expire last year, they traded them for Oliver Ekman-Larsson's bad contract for a number of more seasons. So they've got the new GM, Alvin. I'm curious what's going to happen with them. I think they should move on from JT Miller. Do they move on from Connor Garland? I mean, interesting times in Vancouver. They did sign Brock Besser over the weekend. Alex DeBrincat, he's still number 1 on the trade targets list. And would they trade him for one of the top draft picks? We'll wait and see, but Blake Wheeler still number 3, Chychrun number 4. And he had another new entry. And I almost forgot about this guy having a trade request because he had such a great season last year. Vladimir Tarasenko, who was available in the expansion draft.
This is wild.
And he made a trade request. He's got 1 more year, $7.5 million. He had 82 points last year, 34 goals. Apparently, he still wants to get moved. So maybe someone would take him on. I'm still not sure why. I'm confused, but he had a great year last year. And yeah, there you said Devils number 2 pick and Puljujarvi's number 7. And I'll just go through a couple more. Gibson, number 8. The goalie market, very interesting. Jack Campbell, big name. Ville Husso. Edmonton needs goalie Marc-Andre Fleury. Darcy Kemper's having talks with Colorado. Do they bring him back? So there's some names floating around. The goalie market will be interesting once some dominoes start to fall.
Well, for sure. I mean, and God knows I spent enough time talking to Nielsen over in Edmonton. I mean, goalie is always a possibility. I tell them don't even ask me about Connor Hellebuck. It's not happening. But John Gibson's on that list right now, and he's got 5 more years at 6.4. The problem with Gibson is that he's just been hurt so much, and Edmonton has had they've had enough injury issues with their goaltenders through Mike Smith over the last little while. I'm not sure whether that is. As far as DeBrincat goes, number 1 on the list, as Frank says, it's not when, it's when and not if that the Hawks are going to move the 2-time 40 goal scorer. It's going to be, how soon does it happen, or potentially do they wait later on to the deadline? Bottom line is, it's quite clear that the Chicago Blackhawks are going into an extensive rebuild. And by the time that Chicago gets to where they want to be, he'll be middle-aged, and I believe he's got a $9 million qualifying offer due at the end of the season. So they'd be paying big to keep him on board. So DeBrincat, certainly a very, very interesting player right now when it comes to the trade talks in and around the league. And Wheeler, still 3rd on the list. The full no move is turned to a 5-team trade list, but as I said, that the sense is that number is probably much bigger than 5 if they can find a partner, because it's time to break up and move on in separate ways. Certainly, that's what the feeling of people around the league are feeling.
We did have if anyone didn't stick around to the end, we did have our jokes about text etiquette, and the coach calling Wheeler and him texting back. And then showed it to Tracy, who commented after us. She's like, I knew you guys were going to talk about this. He was just on vacation. Give the guy a break. You wouldn't want to talk to your boss either if you were on vacation. I was like, look, man.
Yeah, I'm not the captain of a National Hockey League team, Tracy. Come on. Let me borrow a Ken Weeb and give you a wake up on WST today.
I'm just like, look, man, this is too easy. Or look, this is too easy.
Low-lying fruit.
This is such low-lying fruit to make a joke and speculate on, and we can all talk about personal text etiquette. I know when my friends call me, no one really calls. It's you usually want to call them back, but I'm sure you get to it when you can. So we'll wait and see what happens there. But it is fun to talk about. We're here to talk about text etiquette as long as we need to.
Yeah, no doubt about that. All right, so we're going to shake this up a little bit. I think Grant McCagg's going to be able to join us a little earlier. So we'll get to that. Mike McIntyre will join us from Montreal a little later on, and Rod Smith as well from TSN. Look ahead to the big game between the Bombers and Lions on the weekend, and of course, a little bit more of the aftermath from last week and last Monday night. Hey, Remo, quickly, just before we just do a couple sponsor reads, our friends at Wallace & Wallace, of course, are Winnipeg's leader in fences, but also overhead doors, and they came up big for you over the last couple of days, helping you with your garage.
Oh, man, I'm so pumped with Wallace & Wallace. I had my garage, the door spring broke. Guys came over pretty quick, fixed it so I could use it, and then came back the next day and replaced it. So I'm very thankful for the quality work at Wallace & Wallace. That is a personal, real-life testimonial. So I appreciate them putting my garage back in working order.
Well, hey, they've been the guys to go to for fencing, for overhead doors like Remis, and as well as we mentioned, if you're ripping around the lake and you see a real nice boathouse, chances are the boathouse door is also from Wallace & Wallace. If you think that you need a new one, or the boathouse door could use some TLC now that the high water's receiving, you can give them a call to arrange a service visit, 204-452-2700. And you can also hit them up at wallacedoors.com or check out their showroom on Lawson Road. And speaking of the showroom, if you got a tennis ball hanging in your garage to keep your bumper from bumping, we've got a special offer just for WST listeners. The first 50 people to swing by 90 Lawson Road will receive a free LiftMaster laser garage parking assist. Just get down there, ask for Haley or one of the gang, and tell them that Huss and Remo sent you from Winnipeg Sports Talk. Big thanks to Wallace & Wallace. And Hey, are the boys at F Apparel are busy right now, but they've got some great promos right now in July. Until the end of July, you can get 3 custom shirts for as little as $210, and dress shirts are delivering in just 3 to 4 weeks. Of course, if you're planning a wedding, talk to the guys about getting custom suits for the fellas as opposed to wasting money on rentals. Their custom suits start at just $400. They've got golf pants, chinos, accessories, shoes, and more. F Apparel really does have it all. Pop down and see Andrew, Alex, and the whole gang, 190 Smith Street, or online at that's EPHapparel.com. Of course, barbecue season is here. You want some healthy options for your family and your guests? Vita Health Fresh Market's the place to be. You know that they've got the best selection of local, organic, and natural groceries, supplements, and beauty products, all at great prices. Some phenomenal non-alcoholic options if you want to have that for your guests. And what about bison burgers and lean bison steaks for the grill, delicious chicken, and more? It's all there at Vita Health. Check out them at any of the 7 Winnipeg locations, including the newest store in Linden Ridge, or check out the fully shoppable website right now at myvita.ca. And hey, the NHL teams are going for some big fish in Montreal at the NHL Draft. You know, everyone is pulling big ones out of our friends over at Aikens Lake at the Aikens Lake Wilderness Lodge, a world-class fly-in fishing lodge where you can be on the water in less than 2 hours from the city of Winnipeg. We'll be out there coming up next month. Cannot wait for it. But in the meantime, think about maybe a trip for next year. Hit up our friend Pitt Turan on Twitter at Aikens Lake, or find out more online at aikenslake.com. All right, we'll focus in on the Jets a little later on when it comes to player moves, but I'm very looking forward to welcoming in our next guest to talk about the upcoming draft for a team that's got 2 first-round picks. Former NHL scout with Montreal, the author of Valley Snapshots, and the founder of Recrutes.ca, Grant McCagg on the program. Grant, what's going on? How are you?
Hey, just getting primed there. It's about 24 hours away, so excited.
What's that? All the work is done for the most part for scouts, for people in the scouting industry. What's draft week like for guys like yourself now that you put together, the draft pieces are out, you've had your conversations, and it's just a matter of waiting?
Well, a lot of these interviews, podcasts and stuff the last few days, talking about the draft. So that's fun, a lot more fun than the 6 weeks spent pre-draft trying to get that draft guide together. It's a lot of work, but a good payoff in the end. It's very happy with this year's edition, and hope I came close with my list as I usually do.
You know what? Just before we get into kind of talking about some of the players on that list right at the top, I mean, just fill people in right at the get-go where they can find this. I know there's a lot of people that are doing some cramming beforehand and want the best information available. Fill us in on what you and the team at Recruits have got ready for folks.
Yeah, well, just put out a draft guide that really covers things well. Like I interview a lot of a lot of scouts in the NHL that are crossover scouts, and I do it more in the style of the hockey news, that Bob McKenzie started 40 years ago when he started doing a draft preview, where he would interview NHL scouts and get quotes from them, because they're who better to describe what a player looks like and what the NHL teams are looking at and think about a player than to get the viewpoint of the NHL scouts. So I utilize their opinions and their descriptions of players more so than my own, which is different than the usual draft guide. But I'm fortunate to have those resources because I was a scout in the NHL and got to know some guys.
Well, it's always a phenomenal piece each and every year. Recruits.ca is the website, folks. Make sure you're checking out that out. There you got it. He's got the lid right on.
Yeah.
Grant, let's talk about the top of the draft. And this has been a fascinating year for a number of reasons. For 2 years, we've been hearing that Shane Wright's the shoe-in #1 overall pick. He had the exceptional status. And it seems like throughout this year, that opinion, more and more scouts have sort of gone off that. You've been maybe ahead of the curve on this. I see you've got a pinned tweet from May 18th saying that Shane Wright will not go top 2. talk to us about the top of the draft, the number one overall pick. Why Shane Wright isn't your number one player, and who is?
Yeah, well, actually, since February, since the Olympics, maybe a week after, I put Slafkovsky at number one. So it's been since late February, early March that I've had him as the top prospect. And then I thought he only confirmed that with his play at the World Championships. 9 points playing against men as an 18-year-old was pretty impressive, especially a kid that size. That the skill that he flashed was just incredible. I thought in the two main men's events of the year at the end of the year. So that sealed it for me and a lot of scouts. There were people, a lot of, and I mean myself included, that were a little disappointed with Wright's play this year. I mean, he put up points. His point totals weren't bad, but for first overall picks, the last 8 that have come out of the CHL, they averaged 121 points in their draft years. Like usually they're cut above other players, and Wright I think was 10th or something like that in scoring in the OHL, which is by no means poor. But when you're when you're looking for a first overall pick and you compare it to past ones, it was underwhelming points wise, and also his play away from the puck became a concern this year, where I didn't see the effort maybe that you're looking for. And we're pretty critical of a guy going first overall. We really want to see it all, and that part of his game was a concern this year. So because of those reasons, he dropped a bit, and Slafkovsky confirmed it with his play against men at the end of the year.
Yeah, Slafkovsky's very interesting in that he wasn't playing in a high league, but it really, from the sounds of it, from speaking with you and some other scouts, it was the way he played in the Olympics, but the World Championships especially, where he really dominated, and that was a breakout, a coming out performance for him at the absolute perfect time, of course, because it's pretty much last call before you end up getting your name called.
Yeah, for sure. And he had a strong playoff too, I thought. And it was the Finnish men's league, which, is a step or two above the OHL as far as I'm concerned. I mean, he had 7 points in 18 games, which, on the surface doesn't look that great, but that was top 20 in the playoffs, and top 5 on his own team, which for an 18-year-old kid playing against men in what I think is one of the best pro men's leagues in the world, which is very low scoring, which proves that he was top 20 in scoring with 7 points in 18 games. Gives you an idea of how low scoring and how tight checking it is. And I thought he played a really strong all-around game in the playoffs. And his last 10 games, basically from 2020, all of 2020, the rest of the year, his last 10 games in Liga, he had 4 goals, and then he had a strong playoff. He was the MVP of the Olympics, and then was great again in the World. So as far as I'm concerned, there's people that say, well, he only did it in small amount, and I think certainly since January 1st, there's not been another prospect that's come close to him.
Grant McCagg of Recrutes.ca with us. Make sure to give him a follow on Twitter at Grant McCagg. And let me just ask you, while we're talking about this first round pick, because there is some, I'm sure, consternation amongst Habs fans as to where they're going to go. I mean, everyone will have their own first prospect. Do you think that Wright goes number one, or is there more and more buzz? I mean, certainly if you look at the betting odds right now, Shane Wright's the favorite, more than minus 300. But Slafkovsky seems to be getting more and more momentum. Might the Habs side with you in your line of thinking and take the Slovak number one?
Yeah, I don't know what, those betting guys are certainly not ran by an NHL scout, that's for sure. Because the majority of the ones that I speak to, and I spoken to a lot, think that Slafkovsky's the guy that's going first. That's been the buzz for a while now. The majority of NHL scouts prefer him. I mean, Bob McKenzie's list had him number one. 9 scouts that I've contacted, who I assume they aren't the same ones as Bob, but maybe there's a crossover 1 or 2, but only one of them had Wright number 1. So certainly in the NHL community, the expectation isn't Wright, but the media has, for 2 years, it's been Wright, and they don't seem to accept the fact that there's a very good chance that it won't be Wright. So I would just say be prepared for it to be Slafkovsky, because I'm pretty sure that that's who they're taking.
Well, okay, so if the Slovak goes number 1, you've then got the New Jersey Devils on the clock at 2. Now, this could be complicated by a potential trade. We've heard that Jersey may very well be open to trading that number 2 pick. But is Shane Wright a shoo-in for number 2, or is there another player that could leapfrog him as well?
Well, my pinned tweet says I don't expect Wright to go top 2, so you know what's coming, right? It ain't Wright.
Who's the guy?
Well, I mean, personally, I don't think New Jersey was very happy with Wright this year. That's the word I'm hearing, that they, like a lot of us had some concerns with his play away from the puck this year. I mean, they need defensemen. They certainly don't need another center. If they didn't like the way Wright played, and there's certainly no need for a center, do they trade down a few spots, or do they take a defenseman? Personally, I think they might just move back a couple spots. If there's someone else out there that really wants Wright, not a bad consolation prize number 2, the guy that for 3 years everyone thought was number 1. There's, so perhaps they can move back a spot or 2 and pick one of those defensemen, because that for sure is their biggest need. I mean, they drafted Hischier number 1, they drafted Hughes number 1, they drafted Zaka 7 or 8, they drafted McLeod 12, they drafted Mercer in the top 20. They're all natural centermen, and they're all young. So to draft another center, just first of all, I don't know that they want to do that, and second of all, it's not the right fit.
What do you think of Logan Cooley? He's the other center that we've heard, in the mix for a top 3 pick. And, we had Chris Peters on last week who said he actually likes Cooley the most out of the 3. I mean, is he in the mix?
I have him ranked ahead of Wright. So, I mean, I don't mind him either, Personally, I have Noah Ostlund ranked 2nd overall. No one else has that. He, to me, he outplayed Cooley at the under 18s. They went head-to-head in the gold medal game. He scored 2 goals, won 7 and 9 faceoffs against Cooley, and outplayed him all tournament. NHL scouts that I've talked to all say that he was the best player in that tournament, and I thought he was fantastic all year too in the Swedish Junior League. So that's my big dark horse. That's who I would pick number 2. But I mean, I understand he's not going there. I haven't hired other people, and that's fine. Cooley, one of the best skaters, one of the smartest players, and one of the top playmakers. So, you like his offensive skill package. I think, I mean, maybe Jersey takes him at 2 and he can play on the wing. He might be a little more open to playing on the wing than Wright. And they end up putting him with Jack Hughes, to 2 former U.S. development team centermen that could play together on the Devils. But certainly I think if Wright and Slafkovsky go 1-2, that Arizona won't hesitate to take him at 3.
Grant, what about the blue line? I know you've got David Jiricek, the Czech, ranked as the top defenseman. We've seen others that are sort of a top-up between Nemec and Jiricek. In your opinion, are those the top 2 guys? Why does the Czech get the nod? And how big is the gap between the top 2 defensemen and the rest of the available D?
I actually have Nemec ranked as the top defenseman, but it's I have the top 4 guys between 9 and 14. Basically ding ding. I mean, there's hardly anything to choose between. Actually, I have Minchikov 2nd ranked. I have him at 10. I have Nemec at 9. I have Jiricek at 12, and I've got Korchinski at 14. And I mean, it could be. I've heard every scout's got a different. The NHL scouts all have a different guy they like top at the top between those four. Wouldn't be surprised if Minchikov ends up being the first one taken, because he looks like he has the most offensive upside. Right now, Nemec and Jiricek are the best, but you're trying to project who's going to be the best defenseman or player in general in 3-4 years, and most of them seem to think that Nemec and Jiricek matured a little early and maybe aren't going to physically improve that much more, and the other two will. So that puts it up in the air as far as I'm concerned. But certainly lists you see make you think that Nemec is probably going to be the top defenseman taken. Jiricek missed about half the year. He blew out his knee in the first game of the World Junior Championships, and there's a little risk involved there, being that you don't know exactly what you've got there offensively, even though you already know that he's got the size, he's a big kid, really good defensively, probably be the best defensive defenseman. But the question with him is just how much offense are you going to get from him?
Grant, let me ask you about two studs from our own Winnipeg Ice here, Connor Geekie and Matthew Savoy. I believe Central Scouting had them rated 4th and 5th for North Americans. But much like this draft, every list you look at, there can be some pretty big differences in the opinions on those two players. Where do you have Matt Savoy and Connor Geekie?
Yeah, you had to ask that question, eh? Those are two guys that I ranked a little lower than what you normally see. I've got Savoy at 16 and Geekie at 20. I mean, they're probably going higher than that, especially Geekie. But this is a draft where there's going to be teams that have Savoy 5-6 and Geekie 5-6, and there's going to be teams that have them closer to 20. I mean, I've heard it from different sources. I know a scout that has Geekie ranked late first round. So it's so unpredictable what's going to happen in this year's draft, and that's part of the fun and the intrigue with it. Geekie got a top 2-line role this year, and he played, with good players, 18 minutes plus a night, and he was in on 16% of the team's offense. Like 70 points on the surface looks pretty good, but considering how high-powered an offense they had, how much, he got power play time, he got top 2 center time all year. He played with Savoy, he played with really good players, like, on and off Milne and the rest. His 16% of the team's offense is a little disappointing for someone that you might be considering taking in the top 10. I think that maybe that's a little high for him, but certainly you're getting a big kid with middle line upside at center all day long. So that likely gets him picked in the top 15.
Well, and speaking of the top 15, I mean, let's imagine you're with the Winnipeg Jets right now, and you are on the clock at the 14th selection. Are you probably expecting, and it seems like this has happened with Winnipeg over and over again. I mean, like Kyle Connor, they had ranked 6th. They ended up getting him at 17th. I mean, we've seen guys sort of fall into their laps. Cole Perfetti, another example. Yeah. How would you handle that 14th overall pick? And I mean, in specific, if they had their eyes on either of those Winnipeg Ice players, I know you've got them ranked a certain spot, but do you think either one of those guys might be there and available for them when they make their pick at 14? Yeah,
well, according to my list, at least they'd both be available. And then, imagine if they passed on both of them like that, they certainly there'd be some pressure to take. I mean, who's going to know them better than the Jets, right? So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see if, I think they probably almost hope, if they aren't high on their list, that they're both gone, by 14, so they don't have to go down that road. Certainly Montreal is, has seen that one more than a few times where they didn't take the top-ranked Quebecer and heard about it later on, But, yeah, I mean, that you're exactly right. I think I had Perfetti ranked 4th or 5th, and they ended up getting them, at the end of the top 10, which I thought was steal. Loved Line. You know, I had him ahead of Matthews, so that's how much I loved Line in his draft year. And I mean, he started out at House of Fire. Kyle Connor had him ranked top 12. I remember that well, and I was shocked that he was still there in the late teens. So yeah, they've certainly had some guys drop in their laps, but they've also done a really good job of drafting, and I trust that they'll do the same thing this year. They'll pick up a really good prospect.
Well, the Kyle Connor draft, of course, is the infamous Boston making those moves and going 13, 14, and 15. And then the next 3 picks off the board were Matt Barzal, Kyle Connor, and Thomas Chabot. Man, what a do-over would look like for the Boston Bruins if they could go back to that year.
If they'd have just followed my list, they'd be laughing now.
No doubt about it. Hey, Grant, overall, because I mean the Jets are also picking at 30. We've heard that the super elite high-end talent, like there's no Matthews, there's no Line A. I mean, that's not what we're talking about here. But we have heard that the quality players do go into the first round. I mean, give us an idea about your tier of those kind of first-round worthy players. How many of them are there? And what should the Jets be thinking that might be available for them at the end of the first round with that 30th overall?
I think the top 20 in this year's draft is very good. Like it goes 20 deep with players that could be, top 4 defensemen or top 2 line forwards. And then after that, you get kids that there might be some question marks with. But certainly there's still talent that has the, if they reach their full development, has second line upside. And that's usually the case, when you go from 20 to 40, you're getting kids that you hope might become second line players, but more likely to be third line players or 4th, 5th defensemen. But guys can slip through the cracks too. I mean, the rushing factor is going to have something to do with it.
Well, let's get to that as well. I mean, I know you talk to folks and scouts from National Hockey League teams all around. What are you hearing right now about the Russians, and how hesitant will teams be to pick Russians this year as opposed to, years past?
I think they'll be very hesitant. It's hard not to be. I mean, you read the stories of what happened with Fedotov there. Putin sends him on a train to Siberia or whatever he did there, the kid. And I mean, are they going to be allowed to come over? Like there's so much uncertainty right now. The West is obviously not cooperating with Russia for good reason. And Putin seems like, vindictive type where, who knows what he'll do. He's a hockey fan too. So, I mean, he seems to be rather spiteful. So, I mean, there's that end of it. Do they come over? I mean, there already did exist a reluctancy to draft Russian kids that are playing in Russia in their draft year, but especially this year. And then Miroshnichenko with cancer, then that's on top of things, and it's just, I mean, going into the draft year, he was considered one of the top 2. Him and Wright were the guys, So a year ago at this time, he was thought to be one of the 2 best prospects for the draft. So you talk about a wild card, that guy epitomizes it for this draft.
Yeah, high risk, a potential high reward, but could also blow up on you. Grant McCagg from Recrutes.ca, getting ready for tomorrow's round 1 of the NHL Draft. Grant, just before we go, you mentioned Ostrom, a player or 2 that you're particularly high on that we might not see as high on some of the other boards that folks should look out. And if they hear their team pick them, they should be very happy.
Yeah, I know Ostlund for sure is my main sleeper pick. There's a Russian that for me, I don't know that he'll even get drafted because he was eligible last year. And I mean, NHL scouts didn't get to see him that I spoke to this year because, for a lot of reasons. But Buchelnikov, the team ends up with him. I think that's a real wild card. It's funny, it reminds me of Reshevsky, Dmitry Reshevsky, who I ranked 60th overall in his draft year, and he went undrafted. And then last year, Winnipeg picked him, and he was the top scoring goal scorer in the Russian junior in the year that I had ranked him. And then last year he played like KHL. This year he scored like 20 goals in the KHL and looks like a really good prospect for the Jets. So that's my kind of Reshevsky type Russian dark horse, is this Buchelnikov kid who, as far as I'm concerned, is one of the 5 most skilled players in this draft class. From what I've seen, he's just he looks like young Kaprizov, that skill wise. So we'll see. He's the big wild card for me.
Well, of course, yeah, Reshevsky and Chibrikov, both the Jet picks that, played very well. And that hadn't been a place where they'd gone very much in the past with Russian players. It'll be interesting to see whether that happens. I mean, I've seen some mocks that have the Jets taking not 1, but 2. But I have a feeling maybe being a little bit more risk averse, that's less likely to happen this year as opposed to maybe in a normal year. Grant, thanks so much for the conversation. Looking forward to it. Recrutes.ca, folks, get on over, check it out, get the draft guide. And Grant, enjoy tomorrow night. May all your picks be bang on, and may your mock draft be perfect.
Thanks, Andrew.
Appreciate it. There's Grant McCagg. And give him a follow on Twitter as well, folks, at Grant McCagg. Got a great pin tweet right there. Bold 2022 NHL draft predictions. Number 1, Wright will not go top 2. And number 2, we talked about this, Ostlund goes much higher than expected. All right. We will get back to Montreal. Mike McIntyre coming up in a few minutes with us. As we do that, do want to thank our friends at Culligan Water for their great support of Winnipeg Sports Talk. 65 years in business as a locally owned company. They've got it all: water softeners, filters, bottled water coolers, whole home systems, and drinking water systems, not to mention citywide water delivery services and commercial and industrial water products and solutions. 1200 Sargent Avenue, 694-5180, and online at drinkculligan.com. Hey, our gang Manitoba Battery is the home with a $99 deep cycle battery. You're not finding anyone in town that can compete with that price, whether it's for your camper, boat, or anything else. You get the best price and the best service from the guys and gals down at Manitoba Battery. Not to mention, you're also going to save yourself a ton of time because they're going to bring the battery to your door at no extra cost when you live inside the perimeter. For you folks that may live a little outside, but within the Winnipeg area, still bring it to you for a small additional fee. Forget the big box stores when it comes to batteries. Shop local, get a better price, and enjoy the convenience and service that Manitoba Battery has to offer. Learn more at manitobabattery.com or go visit the team in the coolest JetBlue building in Winnipeg at 1026 Logan Avenue, open 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. daily. Might be a run on jerseys coming out of the draft over at Royal Sports. Obviously, there could be some big-name players going elsewhere, and fans might want to grab their new duds. And, of course, every team will have a bunch of fresh prospects coming in. Royal Sports is the merchandise capital of Manitoba, certainly. Probably the best store coast to coast, to be honest with you, with a huge selection of NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, massive NHL section, tons of Jets gear, and, of course, CFL and the Winnipeg Blue Bombers as well, not to mention soccer, baseball, softball, the biggest hockey store in town, and of course, bikes, and more bikes at the back. And don't forget all that new disc golf equipment coming in. Dominate summer and support your team at Royal Sports, 750 Pembina Highway, and online on Instagram, Royal Sports Pembina. Check them out. Make sure to give them a follow for the latest merchandise drops and sale information. Dustin Nielsen and I got to the lock shop earlier today. We'll actually get to the Coolbet Lines because Mike's going to be a few minutes before he comes with us. But the Scottish Open is going this weekend. Normally, you don't spend too much time talking about the DP World Tour. But with 14 of the top 15 players in the world right now in the field, an unbelievable gathering of the top players getting ready for the Open Championship. You can check that at Coolbet as well. And of course, whenever we talk golf on the program, we do it for Breezy Bend. And I know the focus of the world is going to be on the Scottish Open, but the Barbasol Championship is going on here in North America, and Winnipeg's Aaron Cockrell, based on his standing in the DP World Tour, is going to tee it up in his second PGA Tour event. So a big good luck to former Winnipeg Sports Talk guest Aaron Cockrell. We'll wish him well. And by the way, you can get him at 150-1 over at Coolbet if you want to put a little sprinkle on him. Check out breezybend.ca for all the information on one of Winnipeg's top private clubs, and talk to our friend Corey Johnson about getting on the waiting list for next season for you and your family. All right, good draft chat. We'll have more of that over the course of the next couple days for sure. Shane Malloy will give some draft grades on Friday's show. But Remo, it is fascinating. We've heard this over and over again. Depending on who we're talking to, it seems like there's a different lean and different thoughts on most of these players in the draft. But I will say it's fascinating to hear the discrepancy of opinions, amongst the number one overall pick, having been Shane Wright for so long, and Slafkovsky sounding like he very well could be a number one pick.
Yeah, I guess you could take advantage of the betting odds if you're listening to what Grant has to say, looking at Shane Wright going later. That would be interesting. And so a lot of intrigue. We haven't had this intrigue on the number one for a while. And I was looking at Craig Button's mock draft at TSN earlier this week. He had Shane Wright number one and Slafkovsky number two. Logan Cooley, we've heard a lot lately, number three. As far as the Jets, and I liked Craig Button's mock. We had Connor Geekie, big center with the ice. Wouldn't it be a great story to take a Winnipeg product with number 14? But he also had the big defenseman Denton Mateychuk at number 30, and I'm curious if he would fall because we've heard his name ranked a bit higher. So a lot of intrigue going into tomorrow. Going to be very exciting. Round one in the evening, the Jets with the 2 picks, and then Friday will be an interesting one with the draft taking place, and we'll be here as well Friday at 1. So.
We certainly will be. The Button mock is, for people that were hoping for a little bit more local talent and flavor on this team, I don't think it could fall better. You've got Connor Geekie selected by the Winnipeg Jets at 14th overall from the Winnipeg Ice. And this, as you mentioned, Denton Mateychuk, who, is, I would say he's an average sized defenseman. They've got him listed at 5'10" and a half and 194 pounds. But very, very offensively skilled, was a point-a-game player, 64 points in 65 games. And Button has his closest NHL comparable to Samuel Girard. And Mateychuk is from Winnipeg, had grown up here, played, he was with the Eastman Selects for the majority of his junior career before jumping onto Moose Jaw. He did get 8 games in the MJHL with the Steinbach Pistons in 2021, 16 games with the Moose Jaw Warriors, presumably in the bubble, and did represent Canada at the under-18s. And then last year, in his first real legit full WHL season, had 64 points, 13 goals, 51 assists in 65 games for the Moose Jaw Warriors. And Remo, like so many others, I've seen mocks that have him going before the Winnipeg Jets make their pick at 14. So depending on how things shake out, there will be some solid players, especially at 14. And depending on, the different teams' draft boards, maybe the Jets can get a top 20 player on their list with that pick late in the first round, courtesy of the New York Rangers.
Well, no matter who the Jets select, I'm sure Kevin Cheveldayoff will come out after me like, oh yeah, we had him ranked way higher than this. We got such a steal here. We're really excited to get this player.
Oh, I know you're sort of joking, but that's true. Think of it. Like, what else are you going to say when you get Cole Perfetti at 10 or Kyle Connor at 17? And then listen, everyone's got to make their own list and figure it out. But the fact that this year that's happening guaranteed, because I think that because there's such a lack of seemingly consensus amongst so many scouts, never mind NHL teams, there will be a lot of teams that will be very excited to go and make up their pick, because I think they're getting guys that they feel are giving them great val, as you would like to say, as opposed to just the straight up 1 to 32.
I am joking that every GM says, "Oh yeah, we had him ranked," but in all seriousness, I think the Jets have lucked out with some guys falling, like you mentioned, Connor and Perfetti. I am excited for tomorrow. We got to get ready. I'd like to thank the city of Montreal. Like, is every team going to do? I would like to thank the city of Montreal for hosting the draft. You've done a great job hosting. Thank you for your hospitality. And also,
don't forget the fans back at the draft party.
Oh, yeah. Shout out to all of our fans back at the draft party watching. We see you guys. Thank you. And also, big congratulations to the Colorado Avalanche on winning the Stanley Cup. right? Isn't that what you have to do before your pick?
Yeah, early on. Yeah, congratulations to Joe Sakic and the Stanley Cup champions. Yeah. Joe Sakic's gonna definitely be getting quite a bit of love.
Speaking of Joe Sakic, BA asked about this in chat before we bring in Mike. He's in Montreal. This aired like last week in the US on ESPN. It is debuting tonight on TSN 6:30. Set your PVR, Huss.
Oh, the Unrivaled?
Unrivaled. Here it is. Unrivaled.
Yes!
Avs, Red Wings rivalry. TSN 3 and 4, 6:30 p.m. So make sure you are checking that out. If you are a fan of the rivalry interviews, who's in it? Sakic, Shanahan, like everyone, Chris Draper, McCarty, Claude Lemieux. Awesome stuff. So this is what we've been waiting for a long time, and it's very, very well done.
Remo coming up clutch for the WSTers. I was wondering when the hell we were going to be able to see that, and I was going to actually start leaning on you for some sort of a link that I could just get a stream of it. But there you go, 6:30 p.m. I'm setting the PVR as we speak right now to make sure we see that. Cannot wait for it. All right. Rod Smith, we're going to talk Bombers, a little more on that wild game on Monday night, and a look ahead to this weekend and the huge tilt between the undefeated Bombers and Lions. But we'll do that a little later on. But just as we mentioned to wrap up the Coolbet segment, if you do go to Coolbet.com, you'll be able to see the NHL Draft odds. Right now, it's Shane Wright minus 333, Slafkovsky 2-1. So if you want to ride with Grant McCagg and what he's hearing, we'll see what Mike's hearing right now about that number one pick, and still get plus 200 on Slafkovsky for the first overall pick. And what's interesting, the second overall pick, if it's not Slafkovsky, Shane Wright is 3-1, Jiricek 6-1, Logan Cooley 10-1 as well. So maybe there is some money to be made on the draft as opposed to the chalk. Use the promo code WST over at coolbet.com for a 100% bonus up to $200 on your first deposit. And yes, you can also get in on this Scottish Open odds as well. As I mentioned, we've got we hit it all in the lock shop today, so you can go and check that out. But John Rahm, a very slight favorite, 14-1. Scotty Scheffler and Justin Thomas at 15-1. All right, let's head out to Montreal right now and get the latest on the Jets and the buzz around the city before tomorrow's first round of the draft with Mike McIntyre, the Winnipeg Free Press. Mike, what's up? First of all, congratulations on making it to Montreal. It sounds like many of you and your colleagues had quite a ordeal getting there.
Yeah, there's still some of us who aren't here yet. I just actually came out of our annual meeting for the Pro Hockey Writers Association, and when they did the roll call to kind of take attendance at the beginning, there's a number of journalists from around North America who are still making their way here to Montreal because of various travel delays. I came in last night, and I actually did sort of a bit of planes, trains, and automobile Huss. Took the automobile to the Winnipeg airport, took the plane to Toronto, and then took the train. Nice 5-hour train ride into Montreal last night. And let me tell you, traveling by train compared to airplane is, it is the ultimate in comfort, in relaxation. If you can take a train over an airplane these days, I can't recommend it enough. I was able to do some work. I got the Wi-Fi. It worked great. Could spread out.
Were you planning on that, or was that an audible because of some canceled flight or something like that?
Yeah, that was an audible, and turned out to be a pretty good audible in that sense, because my colleague Scotty Billick, he's still trying to get here.
Billick's not there yet?
He's not here yet. No, he both him and Weber ran into some issues last night. Kenny ended up getting into Montreal around 2 a.m. And there was a lot of stress involved in that. And Scott is supposed to be joining us here at some point this evening. We'll see if, fingers crossed, that he doesn't experience any more issues. So, yeah, travel's not a whole lot of fun these days. And especially if you're going through either Toronto or Montreal, it's an adventure. And I can tell you, I mean, even my one flight into Toronto yesterday, I spent nearly as much time on the tarmac at Pearson as I did in the air flying to Toronto. It was a 2-hour flight, and we spent 100 minutes sitting on the airplane, first waiting for our gate to clear because there was a delayed flight. Shocker. Sitting at the gate, and then they couldn't find a ground crew once the plane departed to sort of usher us in. And good thing I didn't have a checked bag. I mean, I might have been facing an even further delay. They actually asked me if I wanted to check my carry-on, and I basically told them, over my dead body am I parting with my suitcase. I'm still raw from them losing my luggage for a week in Germany back in May. So hold on to your bag at all costs if you can.
Well, hopefully everyone that's going to hear their name called in the first round is there already. You got a piece, and you mentioned both Matt Savoy and Connor Geekie. We were just speaking with Grant McCagg from Recrutes.ca and the 2 Winnipeg Ice Stars that are expected to go in the first round. Met some of the media today. I mean, what did you get out of your conversations with the Savoy and Geekie and their level of excitement and the potential that maybe one of them might be staying here in Winnipeg after the Jets pick at 14?
Yeah, it's interesting. Both members of the Winnipeg Ice, and of course, Geekie is a Manitoba native. I asked them, what kind of conversations did you have with the Jets? And they both said that they had very, very good conversations with the Jets. Now, one of the fascinating things about this draft, Huss, is there's just no real consensus as to how this is going to play out. I mean, I've seen as many mock drafts that suggest Savoy and Geekie are both going to be, long gone by the time the Jets pick at 14. I've seen just as many suggesting, no, they'd still be available then, because all these other guys who some drafts say are going to go later, they're going to actually go earlier. And, I found it interesting. Kevin Cheveldayoff, who's going to talk to us here in the next hour or so, the GMs are here at the Sheraton in downtown Montreal. They're just wrapping up their GM meetings, and we'll talk to Kevin Cheveldayoff as he emerges. But he told us the other day at the Rick Bonus introductory newser that he's expecting a lot of gasps and awes when teams announce their selections. And what he was implying with that is that there's going to be a lot of picks that maybe nobody saw coming, just because there's no real consensus. So when it comes to guys like Savoy and Geekie, I mean, 2 names that obviously hockey fans in Winnipeg know very well, having, seen what they can do with the WHL Ice. It is interesting that they both talked of interviewing with Winnipeg and how well that went. And both guys said, hey, I'd love to play for the Jets. Be a real nice fit. I guess the big question, though, is one or both of them even going to be available at, say, 14? And if they weren't, did the Jets have enough potential interest in one of those guys to potentially look at moving up? And that to me is another element that I think is going to be really interesting to watch here, Huss. If teams have their hearts set on a guy, and because there's so much potential, flip-flopping of draft lists and positions, will we see a lot of movement even within the draft? Let's just say you're the Jets and you're at 14 and say 10 names are off the board and now it's pick 11 and there's a guy still there that you absolutely want, but you're not sure if he's still going to be there in 3 more picks. You potentially do something. Do you package the 30th pick and to try and move up? Do you put 14 and 30 together in some kind of package to get the guy, or do you just hold your breath and hope that your list is so much different than the teams ahead of you that guy you're focusing on is still going to be around? And I'd love to know how much information trading goes on the draft floor between general managers, and I would think not a lot. I mean, there's a lot of poker faces, I think.
Yeah, I bet there's more bullshit than information being floated around from GMs at that time, Mike.
For sure. And so a perfect example of that potential BS, Huss, to get to what you led off this segment asking about, the consensus there, who's going number 1. There's a real feeling here in Montreal that perhaps the Habs, they're kind of bluffing and putting out smoke screens about what they might do to kind of throw off the New Jersey Devils, who are in the number 2 slot And they don't necessarily need a center in Shane Wright. They would probably prefer the winger. But if Montreal makes, Schlovsky, and pardon the pronunciation of the name, if he's their pick, well, suddenly what do the Devils do? They got Heischer, they got Hughes. Are they taking another center in Shane Wright? And so there's some thought, well, maybe Montreal's trying to force New Jersey's hand. Maybe they're thinking, well, what will the Devils offer to basically trade places with us? So you're right. I suspect we could see some real interesting mind games going on the draft floor. And it's going to make for, forget all the potential trades of actual rostered players, just the potential movement of draft picks and trying to get guys that you maybe have on your draft board that other teams don't. It just makes for a lot of real intrigue to this all.
Well, no doubt about it. And, we just had Grant McCagg on from Recruits, who we've talked to, usually once a year around this time. His pinned tweet from May 18th says that Shane Wright's not going in the top 2, and it's still pinned there right now. Wow. So there is a lot of intrigue in and around it. Of course, the other part of probably more so the intrigue today is potential player moves around the National Hockey League, and certainly no shortage of trade rumors when it comes to the Winnipeg Jets. What's the latest on the captain, Blake Wheeler? What are you hearing on that? And do you think there'll be a defenseman shipped out, at least one, this week? And is it most likely Brenden Dillon because of his contract?
Yeah, I mean, Brenden Dillon, to the surprise maybe of not a lot of people, given the style he plays. And it's the reason the Jets seemingly made him a target and a priority last offseason. Not surprising to hear that Brenden Dillon is certainly generating, some interest, maybe more so than a Nate Schmidt or even a Dylan DeMello. So if I were handicapping, which defenseman is most likely being moved to both create a spot, and it's what we've talked about in the past. The Jets believe they have some young guys that could come in and maybe not, they may not be the same player, but they can do some of the same things at a fraction of the cost. And the Jets could use that money and perhaps whatever return they get to fill other holes. I think Brenden Dillon is the guy that's most likely to go at least first. And it would not surprise me to see him on the move here this week. Again, we'll hear from Kevin Cheveldayoff shortly here after the GM meetings. I got to think, and there's a number of things that they discuss, these GMs do, but I got to think this is really where a lot of trade discussions really start to heat up, over these next couple days. So Brenden Dillon for sure. It's interesting, Huss, you and I have talked a lot this offseason about Mark Scheifele, and I don't know about you, based on the conversations that, Rick Bowness had with Mark Scheifele and what Rick Bowness had to say the other day and how Kevin Cheveldayoff answered the question about Mark Scheifele. Certainly didn't sound to me like Mark Scheifele has played his last game as a Winnipeg Jet. In fact, it sounds to me like there's a real belief that Mark Scheifele is going to be a Winnipeg Jet for at least next season. And so to me, that really turns the focus, I think, then towards Blake Wheeler and Pierre-Luc Dubois, who perhaps are now ahead of Mark Scheifele. At least, if I was handicapping the forwards, I'd have Wheeler and Dubois quite a bit ahead now of Scheifele in terms of most likely to move. I just don't know if it goes down here. I mean, it doesn't have to go down here unless draft picks are part of the return. And if you're the Jets, I don't know that that's what you're looking for. Like, you're not trading Pierre-Luc Dubois, I don't think anyways, for a draft pick. I mean, not unless you're then doing something else with maybe your own draft pick or whatever to plug in a player that can take that spot immediately. Because I still get the sense that this is a Jets team that is going to try and do what it can to be a contender this season. They're not rebuilding.
No, yeah, and that was very clear in the introductory press conference with Rick Bowness. And listen, I'm of the opinion that, this all of a sudden, this talk that, hey, everything's good and Mark Scheifele's going to be back is entirely related to Elliot Friedman's report that Pierre-Luc Dubois is set on testing unrestricted free agency in 2 years. But what's interesting, Mike, is that the contract and the team control for both players is exactly the same.
Yes. Well, and one player is 5 years younger than the other, and that's the player apparently, and not to mention that the 5 year younger player is the player that looked like he gave a damn all last season, and that's the one now that is more likely to be moved, it would appear. A turn of events, frankly, I don't think any of us would have seen coming. You know, if you had told me on the day of the exit interviews, after what we just heard from both Pierre-Luc Dubois, who wore his heart on his sleeve, and as he had all season, and Mark Scheifele, who looked at times like he was mailing it in and sounded like he was, you had told me, you know, on that day back at the beginning of May that one of these two guys is most likely gone. Who would have predicted it would be Dubois and not Scheifele? But you know, that's where it appears we are. Now, is that because the Jets, you know, obviously Mark Scheifele is a guy that they drafted, they developed him. They've got him for sure for 2 more years unless they do something. Whereas Dubois has only been here for a year and a half. And if they think that he's not going to be here for much longer, you kind of cut ties with him, I guess, before you go much further down that road. And being a younger player, more contract uncertainty, certainly going into next year, being an RFA, the return, it would be interesting to hear what kind of trade offers would be made right now. As we sit here today, what could you get for Mark Scheifele? What could you get for Pierre-Luc Dubois? What would bring you the biggest return right now? I don't necessarily know the answer to that, Huss. I really don't.
No, I'm with you as well. And I guess the other part of it is certainly a Dubois trade. I mean, if Dubois is traded, I mean, I think you're talking about younger players. I think you're talking about a potential, you know, top 10 pick, that sort of a thing. Because, you know, you trade Laine for Dubois, and I've said if Dubois doesn't sign, that trade is an abject failure for the Winnipeg Jets. The only way that it turns out not to be is if you parlay those assets into something that turns into more for, you know, for down the road. Right. And it's easier said than done to do exactly that. And it might be a step back in the short term. But again, that doesn't sound like that is what the Winnipeg Jets are thinking about doing. So may very well both of those players are back, and they have that 1-2 center punch that they've talked about. And, you know, hopefully Rick Bowness can come in and establish a new atmosphere, a new culture in the room, and get the buy-in from those players. Certainly, I don't think there's any question that Dubois will do that. And, you know, the jury's out, I guess, on Mark Scheifele. And we've heard a lot of things from other people. We haven't really heard from him. But as we said, at least he took the phone call from the coach, Mike.
You're right. At least he didn't just hang up. And, you know, it's interesting, some talk around the draft this week in the day or so that I've been here now, Huss. One thing I think that's worth noting, Mark Scheifele and Tyler Seguin, their little rock, paper, scissor game aside every time Dallas plays Winnipeg, I can tell you those two are close off the ice. They would talk in the off season. They would be, I would imagine if you asked them, Tyler Seguin and Mark Scheifele would consider each other to be a friend. The reason I bring that up is if you look at what Tyler Seguin has had to say about Rick Bowness, he thinks the world of Rick Bowness. Tyler Seguin is on record as saying all kinds of positive things about Rick Bowness, Rick's wife, Judy. And, you know, it's interesting that he's done that, Tyler Seguin has, at a time when you could say that Tyler Seguin's usage and even his importance to the Dallas Stars has been reduced a bit over the last couple of years because younger guys, Jason Robertson, Rupe Hintz, those guys are the next core. So I bring that all up because Rick Bowness is stepping into a situation that in a lot of ways mirrors what he just left. You've got your Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin in Blake Wheeler and Mark Scheifele. You've got your Rupe Hintz and your Jason Robertson in Nikolai Ehlers and Kyle Connor. And I'd love to know, and I suspect it would be really positive, the sort of things that Tyler Seguin has probably told Mark Scheifele about Rick Bowness. And so I got to think that that bodes well, just if we're talking about, running it back this season and trying to maybe mend some fences or, some broken bridges, and seeing what a guy like Rick Bowness could bring out in Mark Scheifele and where the mind and the body and all that would be. It does create a situation where, I think all signs would now be pointing in a different direction than they were just a short time ago, which is Mark Scheifele probably will be back with the Jets.
Well, and here's another thing about Scheif. I know there's been a lot of talk about, his contract and what he's been making over the course of this 8-year deal. And there's been speculation that he hasn't been happy about it. Well, I mean, what can you do? There's no renegotiation of contracts. However, the best thing Mark Scheifele can possibly do, whether he's in Winnipeg or whether he's somewhere else, is play his ass off, be productive, be a great teammate, and buy in and do the sort of things that, can sort of maybe, redeem his image a little bit. Because let's face it, it took a big, big hit last year with the way that he played, and then especially with that conversation he had with the media at the end of the season. And listen, if Mark Scheifele wants to cash in on a big-time deal once this is over, it's entirely up to him how he handles himself and how he plays in the next couple seasons as to what the market is for him 2 years from now on the free agent market.
Well, it sure is. And that's a great point, because the last thing, if you're Mark Scheifele and you feel that you've been underpaid for a number of years, and I think Mark Scheifele wouldn't say that out loud, but I think it's clear Mark Scheifele believes, and he probably has a legitimate case based on where salaries went after he signed his deal, that he has been underpaid. But if you're Mark Scheifele, you're simply doubling down on a pre-existing problem if the way that you respond to that is by sulking and pouting and playing your way, out of some money on your next contract, which at the age of 31 might just be his last contract. So if Mark Scheifele has one big swing left at the plate in terms of getting some money that he believes he's entitled to, well, the worst thing that he can do is not play well. And again, who's he under contract to for the next 2 years? Well, it's the Winnipeg Jets. So barring some unforeseen development, that's who he's got to go to work for. And, they can revisit it, I guess, next summer. See how this year goes. Where's his mind at in a year from now? How did this coming season go? And I guess you cross that bridge when you get to it, in terms of whether you then, if you don't believe that he's coming back, you can't go into the next season, I don't imagine, with him as a pending UFA. But it would appear that they're going to give it a go. And Rick Bowness might just be the right man at the right time to try and, heard of the horse whisperer? He's going to be the disgruntled center whisperer, perhaps, when it comes to Mark Scheifele anyways. Whether he gets a crack at Pierre-Luc Dubois, we'll see. We'll see how this week plays out.
No doubt. Hey, great crowd again for draft week here in Winnipeg Sports Talk live in the YouTube chat. If you haven't already, folks, make sure you hit that red subscribe button. If you're new around here, we're live every day at 1 o'clock Central with the latest, focusing on the Jets and the Bombers and the Winnipeg sports scene and everything else around the world of sports. And for those of us that are here right now, do us a solid, hit that thumbs up. Let's get that over 200. It's a great way to help us spread the channel as well. Mike, back to PLD for a minute, and I'll echo the comments of a number of people in the chat. Listen, I would have said the exact same thing, that, as of right now, in 2 years, I'm going to plan to, sign to test unrestricted free agency. I'm sure the agents tell everybody to say that if they're pressed with an answer. But I'd also say, right now, no one should be surprised. I mean, it seemed like a pretty miserable season. We were all there for all the comments at the end of this year. I mean, who's signing up to sign for 8 years based on what happened last year? Probably no one. And in a lot of ways, Rick Bowness is tasked with changing the atmosphere, the performance of the team. And, if that happens, I could entirely see other possibilities at the end of next season for a player like Dubois if things go well for him and for the team. And frankly, it's a little bit more fun to be a Winnipeg Jet than it's been for the last few years.
For sure. I mean, at the end of the day, careers are short. There's a limited number of teams you can play for, 32. Every team is operating under the exact same salary cap, Huss. So, isn't Major League Baseball where the New York Yankees or the Los Angeles Dodgers can spend whatever they want. I mean, every team's playing by the same rules. And yes, that includes the Tampa Bay Lightning. And so I think if you boil it down, players just want a couple things. They want to be happy and they want to win. And I think everything we heard from Pierre.
And they want to get paid.
And they want to get paid. But if you're good enough, you're going to get paid. You're going to get paid somewhere. So the winning to me is key. And I think we everything we've come to know about Pierre-Luc Dubois, he is a fiercely competitive individual. And losing does not sit well with him, which is why you love him as a player. You don't want a player comfortable with losing. You don't want a loser. If you have a bunch of losers on your team, you know what your team's going to be? They're going to be a loser. You want guys that want to win. And so I don't hold any of this against Pierre-Luc Dubois. Let me just throw something out to you, though, Haas. Did you not find it interesting the other day when we heard from Kevin Cheveldayoff, and he was talking about the interview process, the coach hiring process, and he was talking about some of the interviews he did and how he learned some things about his team. He didn't throw out many names. One name, though, that he specifically threw out without anybody asking him about it, and talked about what a fascinating conversation and almost suggesting that the guy is misunderstood, was one John Tortorella that the Jets, in fact, interviewed. I don't know about you, but if the Jets were seriously looking at John Tortorella, does that not concern you a little bit about how they view Pierre-Luc Dubois' future with the Jets? John Tortorella is basically the reason it would appear that Pierre-Luc Dubois wanted out of Columbus. And were the Jets really looking at bringing him in to work with Pierre-Luc Dubois? And if so, how would that have played with PLD? It's just a question that
not very well would be the easy answer that I think most people would say. And I think it's a great point, Mike, because listen, I don't want to connect the dots too much, but if they were seriously considering bringing Torts in, maybe that suggests that, it's a little bit more than just, I'm going to test unrestricted free agency in 2 years. That most people, maybe it's like, hey, if there's any way you might be able to facilitate a move, I think that would be there. Because we have heard that there's some other Jets that maybe have been less than happy. I'd be shocked if there weren't. I mean, no one seemed to be happy around that team, both around the team and the way they played last season.
Well, I could tell you another one of the Jets that I know wasn't happy when the season ended, but not to the point that he's demanding a trade. But that's Connor Hellebuck. I mean, we saw the frustration in Connor Hellebuck. We heard it. We saw it in his body language. I mean, towards the end of the year, he was coming out. I almost felt sorry for the guy, like the way he looked, just absolutely defeated. And we heard that he's a guy that in those exit meetings probably said something along the lines of, well, if there's going to be a rebuild and if we're not serious about winning, then yeah, move me. But I'll absolutely, I got 2 years left. I want to stick around if we're going to build something here. So, I think there was a lot of that going on at the end of the season. I think the Jets taking a serious run at Barry Trotz at least sent a message to the players that, again, this wasn't a rebuild. They weren't going into the summer with the idea of tearing it down. They were taking a big swing. They swung and missed when it came to Trotz. Rick Bowness, no, he's not going to move the needle, probably with players or the fan base the way Barry Trotz would have. But I think Rick Bowness can bring some of the principles to the table that they were looking for with Barry Trotz in terms of, communication, a firm but kind of fair way of dealing with players. Yes, he's been to 3 Stanley Cup finals in the last 11 years, so he's done something right in the last decade or so of his career. And he's a guy that I think he's going to come in and everybody will have a clean slate with him, but they know that leash might be shorter than it would be, say, with the last coach.
Speaking of coach, we haven't spoke since the weekend.
Yeah.
Just thoughts on the bonus hire. What was your reaction when you heard it, and who do you think has the most to gain from bonus taking over? I'll throw the guy you just mentioned, Connor Hellebuyck, there, and Nikolai Ehlers.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think there's some evidence that young players thrived under Rick Bowness in Dallas. The Dallas Stars, their best players are their young players now. Mira Heiskanen, Esa Lindell, John Klingberg on the blue line. As I mentioned, Jason Robertson just had a massive year. Rupe Hintz. So if you're a young player, I think you're looking at Rick Bowness saying, hey, this is the guy who, if I come in and prove that I belong on this team. So whether we're talking about Cole Perfetti, Billy Heinola, these guys have to think that, hey, I got a chance here to show my stuff and not just play a role, but maybe play a big role. So to me, that's good news for young players. But I think you're right. Connor Hellebuyck, to me, more than anything, you look at what Dallas was able to do at times in front of, Jake Ottinger looked like, the next Vezina Trophy winner, the way he played, especially in that playoff series against Calgary, right? Where the Stars were overmatched on paper by a superior Calgary team. But Dallas gave them a run for their money, took them to overtime in Game 7, nearly pulled off the big upset as, the 7 seed, a wild card. And so if you're Connor Hellebuyck, you got to be excited about, hey, what could Rick Bowness do to help me, be the best version of myself and kind of clean up play in front of me in my own end that's often been a tire fire. So, I think a guy like Connor Hellebuyck has got to be very excited. As for the hire itself, a real surprise for sure, Huss. I think mainly because, well, maybe we would have thought a guy like Rick Bowness, maybe he'd be considered for an assistant or an associate type job. I think we all assumed his days of head coaching were done. And that was out of Rick Bowness's own mouth. He said that, when he stepped down from Dallas, and it sounds like it was a mutual decision. Rick Bowness knew that he probably wasn't going to get extended or a new contract. And he recognized that he took that team maybe as far as he could. But he didn't seem to be thinking that he might get a new contract. And so he was ready to move on. And the Jets were obviously looking elsewhere. But then things changed when the Trotz deal fell through. And so I think when you look at what Rick Bowness brings to the table, not to mention, his connection to this city, to Jets 1.0, a name that kind of came out of nowhere, but at the end of the day, maybe we shouldn't have been that surprised that that's the direction True North went.
Well, and listen, we'd heard Rick Bowness's name thrown out as maybe a potential member of Barry Trotz's staff. Just last one, and I know people are asking on this. It's a 2-year deal for Rick Bowness. This is far from a long-term commitment. Is Barry Trotz still in the mix, or do we need to move on from Trotz Watch?
Well, I asked Kevin Cheveldayoff directly that very question on Monday. I said, as the door closed on Barry Trotz, or could we revisit this in a year? And not surprisingly, Kevin Cheveldayoff didn't want to talk about what ifs and maybes. But he also didn't say, no, we've moved on. And I do think, Huss, that there's at least a glimmer of internal hope that if Barry Trotz, if the coaching bug bites him, during this coming season when he's going to be on the sidelines, that the Jets would have a chance at landing him. And I got to think, based on everything Rick Bowness said the other day, including, I don't blame them for going after Trotzy. I would have done the same thing. Rick Bowness would be absolutely willing to step aside after a year if it meant Barry Trotz was joining the fold. So I don't think that door is closed. But But I also think the Jets are hoping that Rick Bowness can be the right guy to get them where they want to go. And I mean, if we're talking in a year from now about a tremendous Jets season under Rick Bowness, then I don't think we're talking about Barry Trotz or anyone else anyways, right?
Mike, great conversation. Listen, I know you got to go assume the position to speak with General Manager Kevin Cheveldayoff. We'll be paying attention to your tweets and, of course, all of your coverage from Montreal in the Winnipeg Free Press. Thanks for doing this.
You bet. And I don't know if you know this, Huss, the NHL schedule is coming out within the hour as well. So you'll get to see the full slate of the 82 Jets games, who are they playing in the season opener, the home opener, all that.
Opener, Florida Panthers, bring it on.
That would be pretty sweet for sure. We'll see soon.
Thanks, Mike. There it is,
All right.
Mike McIntyre of the Winnipeg Free Press joining us from Montreal. Hey, great stuff in here, folks. Well over 500 people again. Hit the sub if you haven't already, and let's get those thumbs up over 200 if you don't mind. All right. Great stuff. And as I said, we'll be paying attention to that schedule if it does come out. We can probably do a full recap of it, discuss it on tomorrow's program before things get going in the first round of the NHL Draft. We are going to transition, though, and talk some Bombers with our great friend Rod Smith of TSN. Just before we do that, looking forward to actually heading over to Non-Auto Corp afterwards, talk to the fellas and see what they've got on the lot. If you're looking for a new vehicle this summer, before you do anything, head on over to Non-Auto Corp at Waverly and McGilvery and see what they've got there for you. And hey, if there's a particular make and model you're looking for, talk to the experts at Knott. They'll find it for you, get it here to Winnipeg, and get you in it at the best possible price. Why not get into the car of your dreams at a great price with the help of the Knott team, Knott Auto Corp, Waverly and McGilvery, and online at knott.ca. Our friends at Little Brown Jug are ready for Folk Fest, and a lot of people heading out there tomorrow. Make sure you pick up that Folk Fest lager right now, which is available at your favorite Little Brown Jug sales location, or better yet, just pop down and see them in the Exchange on William Avenue. They've got the Folk Fest Lager, Queer Beer, Hefeweizen, Saison, a bunch of great summer beers. They've also got the Summer Variety Pack available to pick up as well. Little Brown Jug in the Exchange, or order online at littlebrownjug.ca. Great day. I think we've got a severe thunderstorm watch in effect right now in the city, but it's pretty hot outside. Great day to pop by one of the Nick and Nicky DQs for a blizzard, and maybe one of those amazing new stack burgers as well. Of course, Nick and Nicky have 4 locations in Winnipeg and southern Manitoba: DQ Northgate, DQ Niverville, DQ Polo Park, and DQ St. Anne's. And all 3 Winnipeg locations are also available on your favorite food delivery app like Skip the Dishes. And you can also hit them up on Instagram at DQ Manitoba to order a custom cake and have it ready for you for whenever you're gathering with friends. All right, we're going to talk Bombers coming up. Of course, whenever we talk Bombers in the Canadian Football League, we do it with our friends at Princess Auto, great sponsors of the Blue and Gold, and of course, hosting Bomber fans for a couple hours before every game at the Princess Auto Tailgate Zone. Check out great prices on cheap beers, hot dogs, soft drinks, and more. Prizes from Princess Auto, and awesome entertainment with my pal DJ Finesse. Next opportunity to do that is a week Friday. But right now, we're going to talk about the upcoming weekend, which is the Battle of the Titans in the West right now, the undefeated Bombers and the undefeated Lions. Princess Auto, proud sponsors of the Blue and Gold, and the spot where you'll find the best deals on the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around. Everything you need to complete the projects on your list or start something new is at Princess Auto. Visit them at their 2 Winnipeg locations, Panet Road, Portage Avenue West, or shop online 24/7, 365 at princessauto.com. All right, the big guy is here, the voice of God. Let's welcome in Rod Smith of TSN to talk some CFL. Rod, what's going on? Thanks so much for jumping on with us.
My pleasure, Hustler. It's good to be on Winnipeg Sports Talk, too. Good to talk to you again. All good.
Well, it's great to have you on as well. And listen, I want to talk about some of the big stories in and around the league and look ahead to the game of the week, really the game of the season so far this weekend with the Bombers and Lions. But let's go back to Monday at BMO Field. You were calling the game.
Yeah.
You've been involved in this game for a long time, have called a lot, have done a million highlights. That's right up there with one of the more bizarre games I can ever remember in the CFL.
It was, and strictly from an excitement point of view, a drama point of view, it's been a real treat for me, because I can't recall so many games close together that have just taken weird turns and had these really dramatic finishes. I mean, I thought the Calgary-Hamilton a couple of weeks ago when the Ticats had a 24-0 lead and blew it was about as crazy it was going to get. And then you had Edmonton-Hamilton. There's other ones that I haven't been involved with that have been really exciting down to the wire. And then this one, which is, there were so many interesting plays, any of which you could have talked about as being the play of the game or the one that, maybe ultimately decided it. And each time they kept being put to the back burner because something else crazy happened. And right up until the end with the Boris Beatty missed extra point that prevented overtime. So, that was nuts. That was off the rails for times.
I cannot remember a single play that was more controversial, less clear cut than what ended up being called the Banks touchdown. Many people here in Winnipeg still refer to it as the Houston interception.
Right.
How did you see that playing out? And do you think that essentially the final call that ended up standing was just simply that it was so difficult to have conclusive evidence to overturn, they had to go with the call in the field?
That's exactly it. That's what I think. If they had called that a pick by DeMario Houston, I don't see how it could have been overturned. Now, when you watch at game speed, and I was confused at what happened because I was ready to call it as a Houston interception, except for the fact that the ball was in Brandon Banks' hands, and he's holding up his hands, and they're signaling a touchdown. And that brief moment of, what? What just happened here? So you watch the replay, and certainly at game speed, it looks like a pick because it looks like Houston still had possession when he hit the turf. That said, as they slowed it down, what was really iffy for Dwayne and I, because we were convinced it was a Houston pick, was that it looked like he started to lose control of the ball just as he was hitting the turf. There was just that little bit of room for doubt. And I think that's why the command center looked at it and thought that they can't overturn it. But you're right. Had they called that an interception, I don't see how they could have turned it the other way. It was just that close a call.
It was, the refs did not have an easy job with that play. And to be honest, I probably watched it another 50 times. And I still can't really, I will say this, I think they got it right. And I know a lot of people were all over us yesterday for talking about that on the show, just because, as I said, I never saw clear, definitive evidence that he had control and was down by contact. And then, of course, we saw what happened to the ball. I mean, it continued going into Brandon Banks' hands.
Yeah.
Credit to Speedy B. The most nuts thing about it, Rod, was never mind what happened with DeMario Houston on the ground. I mean, there was 2 or 3 times where that ball was seemingly about half a centimeter away from the ground in between Banks's legs, and yet somehow did not hit the ground and ended up in his hands eventually.
Yeah, it did. And that part of it, looking back, I do think that, if you're determining that Houston didn't quite have control when he made contact, I don't think it did touch the field after that, and I think it would be a legitimate Banks touchdown. I think he definitely had possession. I don't think it did, but you're right, it was close. There were so many elements to that play, and there were other plays too that would just had you scratching your head. But that was the craziest one on a crazy night in Toronto. That play was nuts, and good on Brandon Banks for being that resourcewul. I mean, he had an interesting night.
Well, he did. I mean, he had that terrible drop earlier, and the next play, they go back to the same play, and Winston Rose pick 6, and the Bombers were off to the races. And listen, the Bombers, we've talked about the way that they won football games over the course of the last couple seasons. This was all about defense. You looked at the numbers. I mean, the Toronto Argonauts went for over 400. The Bombers were pretty pedestrian on offense, still missing Andrew Harris. I mean, that was a big topic yesterday, just how much this team seems to miss that guy. But again, the defense came up big, and we joked that the Bombers' defense is like the Harlem Globetrotters of the CFL with that pick, the tipped pick, and then involving a lateral turning around. I mean, they've got a special confidence, it does seem, Rod, that you get after winning a couple championships, and it always seems like they're there to bail the team out.
They do have that it factor. I agree with you. And I talked to Mike O'Shea about it earlier this week last week before this game on Monday night. Just the confidence that a team that's won a couple of championships might feel in those close situations. The one thing he was willing to admit, because as you know, he's not one to look at the past. He doesn't feel comfortable with it. He likes to concentrate on this season and not be dwelling on, championships of 21 or of 19. But he did admit that when times get tough and teams, you have veterans who know what it's like, know what it takes to win games. Sometimes that championship pedigree can make a difference. And I think we've seen that not only in that game on Monday night, which should have gone to overtime, but also at least one of the games against Ottawa too. And even against Hamilton, with they had the late drive in the first half that helped them get the lead again after the Ticats had it, and then their defense just took over. But the defense does lead the way still with that team, and it did last year too. I think the offense was better last year for the Bombers. I think that's still a work in progress with all the change they've gone with Andrew Harris and Kenny Lawler, Darvin Adams. There's some turnover there too. So, but that defense, despite their changes, is still a dominant D. And yeah, it made a difference. And when it comes to crunch time and just little plays here or there can make the difference, that D still stands really strong.
As I said, you've followed and covered this league for a long time. I mean, Andrew Harris is somewhat of a unicorn. I mean, to be able to do what he's doing at this age, he looked like 25-year-old Andrew Harris in that game. And I mean, what an addition he is for the Toronto Argonauts. But as the Bomber running game sort of struggles to get close to where it was with 33 in the backfield, a lot of pressure on the O-line, but as well as some young players filling the biggest shoes you could possibly have at a particular position of a guy that was so beloved here and helped them win so much.
Yeah, I mean, that was for Brady Oliveira and Johnny Augustine in particular, who were signed up before they tried, it appears anyway, tried to get anything done with Andrew, and he felt snubbed by the offer and insulted and not wanted. And so you can't help but think for those guys, they were probably feeling the comparisons, especially Brady Oliveira, when Andrew was hurt last year, and there was more focus on number 20. But in a game like this, where you're going to look at, it's inevitable, you're going to compare the production. And Andrew, you're right. He looked strong, especially as the game went on too, which was interesting because it was a bit of a slow start, but, and they stuffed him a few times, but he just, classic style, north, south, head down, slicing, powering his way after contact, extra yards. And Brady had I'm looking at it now. So 7 carries for 28, in that game. And Augustine 1 carry for a lost yard, and he did have a couple of catches as well. But no, clearly in the running game, Toronto with Andrew Harris had the better day. But I still think, as said with Winnipeg's offense, I still think it's a good offense. But they've, with Andrew Harris and Kenny Lawler, you get your top receiver and your top running back gone. It's going to take a little bit for Zach Collaros and company to get that together again. But hey, they're 4-0, and that's the ultimate gauge right now, in large part thanks to the defense.
Well, it's hilarious you mentioned that because the Bombers, yes, they're 4-0 in first place, and the Argos are 1-2 and in first place as well. It just goes to show you the discrepancy between the West and the East. But what were the takeaways from the Argos? I mean, it was interesting. At one point, it seemed like they were imploding on the sidelines. Yeah. They're fighting with each other, and yet they battled back to where they should have gotten into overtime, and then obviously have a crushing defeat in the fashion that they had. I mean, I'm wondering whether this is a galvanizing moment for the team that's shown that they can come back against a championship team, or are they very fragile and on the verge of breaking at any point, and the way that game ended might be a very negative result for a team going forward?
I think that's both, and I think where they go forward is up to them now. They have shown their resilience, you're right, but they've also demonstrated an ability to shoot themselves in the foot. And in some ways, off the foot of Boris Bede, that was kind of a metaphor for the way the whole game went, really. They could have won that game. They had some brutal mistakes at the beginning from McLeod Bethel-Thompson, too, who also was much, much better later in the game as the game went on. And he showed the poise that he's shown before in terms of comeback, that he can get the job done. But that bit on the sidelines really left a lot of people, including me, scratching their heads that they have to have more composure, especially with the veterans that they brought in, like Brandon Banks, and they can't have they can't have infighting. So I don't know where they go from here, but that's such a forgiving division right now that they have a chance to turn everything around. I mean, they could have been 2-1. They had a chance to make it a comeback victory over the Bombers. So I'll be curious to see where they go, because they have, obviously, they've demonstrated a few discipline problems and just this penchant for making really costly mistakes. And if they can straighten that out, I think that could be a good football.
When we look at the East, in some ways there was a bit of karma involved, because any Alouettes fan will tell you that they didn't deserve the one in the win column in the first place. Exactly. It was essentially the same way. Can't remember that happening once in a season, never mind twice in the first 4 weeks. But
although Cote's was a field goal try, and this was an extra point, but
I think it was shorter than the extra point, though.
Yeah, you're right. It was 21 yards,
I mean,
it also got hooked to the left. It was crazy.
But when you look at the East right now, I mean, everybody's still in it. I think Ottawa's actually looked quite good. I mean, despite not having any wins so far, I mean, they've had a very difficult schedule. We know that Hamilton's got the talent. I mean, when you look at the East, I mean, absolutely nothing's been determined so far. Who would you be most bullish on right now through the first 4 weeks?
It's really hard for me to say. I'm looking forward to seeing Ottawa live. I haven't seen them live yet, except in preseason, and I'll be in Saskatchewan Friday night for the Riders Red Blacks game. So looking forward to that and seeing how Ottawa looks in a tough place to play at Mosaic. I've seen a lot of Montreal, and I like the Alouettes' potential too. I mean, I don't know exactly what happened with Trey Watson, who was having a good season, looked like one of the anchors of that defense. So be curious to see where they go defensively from there. That said, Montreal, they looked good in Calgary. They looked very good beating Saskatchewan at home and had a decent start against the Rough Riders until Saskatchewan pulled away in the second half in that game. And they should have won in Toronto. So, from what I've seen of Montreal, and then, I'll keep going with the shoulda, woulda, couldas. And I realize they have no value here. Final score is the only thing that matters. But Hamilton has a 24-0 lead over Calgary. They lose. And they had a lead over Edmonton. They seemed in control of that game. They lose in large part because of Dane Evans' inability to hang on to the football. And I still believe he is a very good quarterback. And I know that, that's been a big part of the story in those two losses at home where they could be 2-2. So no point in speculating. I just think the East right now, and anyone talking about one division, I get it because the overall record is 11-1 for the West, but it's early. And I still think there are some good teams in the East. And I think maybe that's, more legitimate talk at the end of the season. If this imbalance continues, then absolutely. But I don't think it's going to.
I haven't looked ahead to the schedule, but one of the games that I will be very excited to see, ironically, it's 0-3 and 0-4, but it's when Hamilton and Ottawa go at it. I mean, it kind of felt like the way Masoli played early on, especially in that opener against the Blue Bombers, almost put some more pressure on Dane Evans to go and maybe do more to help his team win. And I think that's been somewhat impactful with him trying to do too much. That's ended up really shooting themselves in the foot. Yeah,
he is. He's a good guy. I think he's going to be a very good quarterback. I still believe he will be, but he's got to get over this and take care of the football. I mean, both. I mean, the one in Calgary too, where he was trying to make sure, at short yardage on third down that they could get that first down, and it was Titus Wall that took it out of his hands. I mean, it was just a bizarre play, and that allowed Calgary to tie the game and complete their comeback. I mean, that was a tough part for Hamilton. And I think, just rounding out the East, in the case of the Argos, who looked awful in BC, they looked awful at times against Winnipeg, let's face it, when they fell behind 17-0. But they did show, as you talked about, the ability to come back in that game. And so when I look at all four Eastern teams, I see the potential for all four to start turning things around. But there have been so many East-West matchups so far, and in the East especially. I mean, Hamilton's going into week 6 because they have the bye, before getting an Eastern opponent. So that part of the sched I wonder about a little bit. I probably, as a fan, would rather see West versus West as much as possible, East versus East, and then start getting into interdivisional play a little later on in the season. So, for some of these Eastern teams, as they start playing Eastern opponents, the record is going to get worse, obviously. I mean, you might start seeing some separation in that division when they start playing each other.
Well, we've spent enough time on the JV division. Let's talk about the big boys in the West. And listen, I mean, I could talk about the Bombers all day. They're still a team to beat. They're 4-0. But Rod, what an incredible story for the British Columbia Lions and the Canadian Football League of what Nathan Rourke. And I'll be the first to admit, Dusty and I are breaking down the games, and I'll be like, well, let's see what happens when they play a better team. Mm-hmm. And I guess this will be the ultimate test, going up against this Bomber defense. However, going on the road against Ottawa, the way that he played last week, I mean, he is tearing this league up right now. And just from someone that loves Canadian football and seeing Canadians finally get opportunities, especially the QB position, I don't think there could be a better story to start the Canadian Football League season than what he's doing out on the West Coast.
No question. It is the story. And it's, I'm old enough to remember Russ Jackson, by the way. I was a little kid, but I mean, there's no Canadian quarterback that's come along since that has been that good. And I'm not saying Nathan Rourke is yet. It's just too soon. But what he has done so far is truly remarkable. And Andrew, I remember last season, I think back to then, talking to Rick Campbell before their season opener, BC at Saskatchewan, delayed start in August. And Rick Campbell was so effusive about Nathan Rourke when Michael Riley is the starter. And he said things, and, he's normally more subdued in an interview type of situation, very, very even keel. He was raving about him. So I did make note of that, to think that, it sounds like he thinks that this guy is going to have a long career as a starting QB. So as talking about a Canadian quarterback, a rarity, you couldn't help but make note of that. So we go into week one, the opener for BC at Saskatchewan. I don't know if you remember this. A lot of bettors do. When Michael Riley suddenly can't start. That decision.
Oh, we remember.
Oh, yeah. So there was a lot of talk about that. So Nathan Rourke, welcome to the CFL. Welcome to pro football. Rookie, thrown into the fire at Mosaic and saying, by the way, you're starting. And this is moments before. Maybe it's a good thing he didn't have time to think about it. Throws a pick six to Nick Marshall. And I'm thinking at this point, rookie, intercepted for a touchdown right away, thrown into the fire. You could understand if he didn't respond very well after that, but he did. He showed that none of that moment seemed too big for him. He seemed poised, even in what was ultimately a loss, although they nearly came back and won that game. I think it was like 31-28 after they fell behind by 4 touchdowns. And Riley had helped the cause as well with the comeback. But Rourke, it just looked poised under those difficult circumstances. We didn't see a ton of them in the 2021 season. But enough to make me think that I didn't expect this, obviously, but I was thinking at that point, I bet you he could be a starter and a good starter in the CFL. What's happened so far is just unreal. And he looks so impressive. The way his reads, the way he responds to pressure, the way he runs, the way he throws the football. Wow. I mean, it's really quite a story. It is the story in the CFL this year. And by the way, Hustler, BC's defense too, credit to them. This is a team effort, especially the dominant victories over Edmonton and Toronto at home. I know it was a higher scoring game in Ottawa, but still, that team looks for real, doesn't it?
Well, it certainly does. And I think that the big question was whether Nathan Rourke was going to be able to get the job done. But the fact of the matter is that he's doing it and doing it so well. And they've been able to take a lot of money that's normally designated to the quarterback position, right, and put it to offensive weapons for Rourke. Yeah. And on the defensive side of the football. Now, obviously, if he continues playing this way, he'll be in line for a big raise, and that won't be the case. But for right now, it really does seem it's the perfect storm for BC. Everything that they'd hoped to happen is coming together, which sets up this Saturday night battle against the two-time defending Grey Cup champs, Rod. I mean, what do you expect coming up on Saturday? How would you preview this game? Not necessarily making a pick, but Bomber defense, BC offense, and, of course, a Bomber offense that still has a lot to give. And I'm sure they would love nothing more than to show that they're still the team on Saturday night.
Yeah, I mean, I have no reason to think right now, from what I've seen of Winnipeg's offense, I think they're going to tear it up at BC Place the way the Lions D has been playing so far. Not saying they're not going to get production, but I still think that's a work in progress on that side of the ball. But you're right. The matchup is Rourke and that offense against what, until proven otherwise, is the top defense in the Canadian Football League. And they had some great moments. Despite the Toronto comeback, they had some great moments. I mean, Adam Bighill had a great game. Willie Jefferson doing Willie Jefferson things. I mean, they still, they've had some changes in the secondary, but I still love Winnipeg's defense. And this is the big test for Rourke, who has looked especially dominant on, looking right at home at BC Place. It's that matchup, that offense versus that defense, that will really, I think, answer some questions about just how good Nathan Rourke and BC's offense is, to see how they can do against the defending Grey Cup champions.
We cannot wait for the game. And by the way, we should give a shout out to Ford and Edmonton for also, back-to-back wins by Canadian quarterbacks in the league. I mean, I don't know. Did you guys have a stat? Like, when was the last time that happened? Or has it?
I can't think of that. I mean, I don't know if we've asked and we've tried to research that out and looked at the starts of, say, I don't know, Andrew Buckley or Brandon Bridge or, going back to Julio Caravata and Jerry DiTilio even further back. But I can't think of, so close together on back-to-back nights and Canada Day weekend, too. I mean, what a story it was. By the way, with Ford, the numbers weren't nearly as impressive. But that poise I was talking about where the moment didn't seem too big, Trey Ford seems to have that too. It's really interesting. He's got a level of confidence that he had said before that he expects to be a starter. And which is really, it's kind of I'd be very encouraged if I was a teammate of his to hear that kind of confidence coming from him, that it's not like he's wide-eyed, golly gee, I can't believe I'm getting this chance. He's not that way at all. So no. I look for really good things from him too. And bear in mind, I mean, this is his rookie year as Nathan Rourke is in year 2.
Yeah, he was in U Sports last season. I mean, Hey, first Canadian quarterback drafted in the first round since 1980 in the league as well. The fact that he's getting a chance so early, I think, is shocking to most observers.
Yeah, and Chris Jones had said about him, the University of Buffalo did they had a pro day, and part of their pro day, not just for their own players, they do invite select players to come and take part in the pro day for all the scouts to see. So Chris Jones was down there at Buffalo's pro day, and Trey Ford had been invited. So I guess they do invite select, even U Sports athletes to come down. And he said, this is Chris Jones, said very bluntly, very matter-of-factly, and I believe quite sincerely, far and away the best athlete there. Wasn't even close. That's how Chris Jones feels about Trey Ford.
Well, and they put their money where their mouth was with the selection in the first round. Rod, Saskatchewan and Calgary, everyone's going to be talking about the Bombers and Lions. I think a lot of people thought that Calgary might have a bit of regression, and that there they are, as usual, with a great record. And Saskatchewan's in 4th right now, although 3-1 and poised to go 4-1 if they can beat the winless Ottawa Redblacks on the weekend. Just quick hits on Calgary and Saskatchewan and just the overall strength of the way the West is shaping up.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the West is best, obviously, right now. And with Calgary, it's resilience. They've done a few Stampeders games. Against Montreal, they were down by 10 at the half, and they came back and won. We talked about the one in Hamilton the next week, down 24, down 24-3 at the half, chipped away and got that brilliant play by Titus Wall to complete the comeback, and then they win it in overtime. And they've got a kicker like Rene Paredes, who this never seems to miss, certainly not this year. I know he had a rough against Saskatchewan in the playoffs. He had what he calls his worst game in the playoff game last year, but one of the best in the history, arguably the best kicker the CFL has ever seen. But Calgary has, and against Edmonton, when they played the Elks before, they fell behind, but they came back. And so, but in this rematch in Edmonton with the change at quarterback, I'll be curious to see how that plays out. As for Saskatchewan, I couldn't believe how good their defense was in the opener against Hamilton, where they just tore apart the Ticats offensive line, made it a miserable day for Dane Evans. Pete Robertson, especially, I know he's he and Lanier, I think, are co-defensive players of the week. They still look really good. They had a brutal one in Montreal, and I think maybe Craig Dickinson, who loves his special teams, that's part of his background as a coach, has to be concerned with their kickoff coverage, with Chandler Worthy taking a couple of back-to-back games. But aside from that, when Cody Fajardo gets going, I mean, wants more out of the deep ball, of course, with if his receivers can stay healthy. And I think he looked good in the second half. That team looked much, much better in the second half against Montreal. It's just there's so much competition, though. We're talking if the Lions are going to be this good and the Bombers are still going to be good and Calgary is better than expected. Saskatchewan's got so much competition out there, and everybody must be feeling the pressure to keep winning. So big game for the Riders coming up, because they do have the one loss, and right now you got 3 unbeatens going in, although obviously that's going to change too with Winnipeg and BC. So
Rod Smith with us here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Rod, this has been such a great conversation. Just on the way out, I got to ask you, after so many years on the desk and being part of the panel, how much fun are you having calling the games from the booth?
I had so much fun with those other jobs, and I do miss them in some ways, but this is just a joy for me. I'm late in my career, and it's the best seat in the house to be able to watch a game, be compelled to pay attention to every single play, following every single game is a story. It is. It's just one team jumps out to a big lead and the other one comes back, and I love the drama at all. I'm having a blast, and be involved calling Grey Cup last year with such drama, and that one too going to overtime. It's been a thrill, a real highlight for me, and I'm constantly looking forward to the next game. So for me, I can't wait for Riders Red Blacks, but yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It was fun on Monday night too, believe me.
Well, speaking of highlights, this has been a real highlight for us to have you back on
thanks.
our program. Thanks so much for doing this. Have a great weekend back in the booth, and say hi to Milt and the rest of the jokers on the panel for us as well.
Will do. My pleasure, and congratulations to you guys for the success of Winnipeg Sports Talk. Pleasure to be on with you.
All right, great stuff with our guy, Rod Smith. Cannot wait for that game Saturday night, Bombers and Lions. We'll hit on that over the next couple days as well. All right, schedule's out. Take a quick look at that in just a minute. Do want to thank our friends at Boston Pizza for their great support of Winnipeg Sports Talk. Stop by your local BP and check out their great summer menu featuring a Carnitas pizza. I've had it. It's awesome. Carnitas tacos. And, of course, pizza flights are back as well. And if you can't get out, you can always get online, check out their game day deals, and order online at bostonpizza.com. You know what goes well with a pizza? A great cocktail. How about a Canadian Club and Ginger? Good news, folks. You don't even have to make it yourself. Ready to drink. CC and Ginger is now available at all local beer stores, liquor marts, and more. And, of course, you can pick it up at the next Bomber game as well, as Canadian Club is available everywhere at IG Field, along with the rest of the Beam family of products as the official spirits of the blue and gold. We did the Coolbet lines already. We do have to get to our Assiniboia Downs picks, but before we do that, Remo, we got a schedule to talk about. The Jets schedule has just been released. Home opener, Thursday, October 14th against the New York Rangers before the team hits out on a 3-game road trip at Dallas, Colorado, and Vegas. Man, both Vegas games this year, this really sucks because I was hoping to put together maybe a little bit of a trip for some WST listeners. We got both Vegas games in the first 7 games of the season, 8 games of the season in October.
Oh, it's great for me. I'm in. Let's go. Works great.
Yeah, actually, yeah, that's a better time for you. Okay, well, you know what? Maybe that
works
does
great.
work out.
I'm in. I am 100% in. Let's plan a trip. Let's go.
All right, we're gonna make this happen right now.
Oh man, that's really great.
I'll tell you what I wanted to know. First and foremost, I said this to you, Remo. When the hell do the Jets welcome in the Florida Panthers and old pal Paul Maurice? That game, Tuesday, December 6th, Canada Life Center, the return of Pomo to the peg with one of the beasts of the East last year, at least, the Florida Panthers.
Yeah, here, I got the schedule up. They tweeted out. I haven't had a chance to look at it. I'm busy, been retweeting and tweeting. But yeah, Rangers, home opener, when you go on the road. I think you just went through all this. What about the last games of the year? Minnesota, Colorado.
On the road, and that's coming off a 5-game homestand with Detroit, Jersey, Calgary, Nashville, and San Jose getting in. It looks like the longest homestand of the year is 5 games. They've got that a couple times.
There's January
couple
to
4. I mean, it's kind of split up. We don't have any of those 8-game homestands or anything like that. And as far as road trips as well, they've got another 4 spot. The month of March is interesting. March is usually a game where the Jets play a ton at home. In a 3-game homestand, Edmonton, San Jose, Minnesota, then on the road for 3, back for 1, on the road for another couple, back for 1, and then the West Coast road trip, speaking of trips, late in March at Anaheim, at LA, and at San Jose for those of you that might be planning on a road trip to take in the Winnipeg Jets. So it's up right now. We'll sort of spend some more time going through it tonight and talk about it tomorrow with the games of the year. Great spot for maybe hitting the Jets on the road, as well as some home and road splits and top games of the season. But tell you what, December 6th, Panthers Jets in Winnipeg. I'm looking forward to that one. When do the Jets play in Florida?
March 11, Saturday.
Ooh, tell you what. For folks that do like to hit the Jets games on the road, finally, we've got, just March is going to be a great spot. You can go do Saturday and Sunday, Florida and Tampa Bay, March 11th and 12th. or Thursday at Anaheim, Saturday at LA against the Kings. So a couple great options to get to some warmer climates in the month of March before spring comes here to Winnipeg.
Yeah, again, I'm sorry everyone if I'm scrolling. I'm trying to read the schedule for the first time as well here and put it all on the same page.
Oh, people asking where you can find it. Just go to the Jets Twitter right now. They've got a link and to an article, and this is what we're seeing right now is the list schedule, because it doesn't seem to be entirely in on the calendar as of yet. So it is all there.
Yeah, they tweeted it out. So what I see the Monday, January 30, then Saturday, February 11. I'm assuming in between then is the All-Star break. I don't even know where the game is this year. Well, I guess we'll have full analysis breakdown. This is just immediate reaction where we're scrolling.
Home opener, Rangers, October 14th. Maurice coming back December 12th.
People are asking Saturday afternoon games. I'm trying to see if there's a lot of weekend afternoon games. I see November is the first one, 2 p.m. against Chicago. Okay, so 2 p.m. against Anaheim. That's a nice Sunday afternoon game. 2 p.m. January 8 against Vancouver, another Sunday.
Oh, I won't be taking that game. Putting an afternoon game head-to-head with the NFL playoffs is bananas.
They do that every year. I just remember watching, was it Blair Walsh missed?
Yeah, the Blair Walsh kick happened during the Evander Kane tracksuit game.
I remember that. So trying to look at not a ton of afternoon games.
Sunday, February 26th against the Islanders. And that's it. So what, 4 afternoon games?
Do we get any Saturday? Are we blessed with any national TV dates on Saturday night? Oh, here's a home. Of course. Pittsburgh.
Leafs, October 22nd against the Leafs.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Crosby and the Penguins on Saturday, November 19th. That will definitely be a hot ticket.
Yeah.
No Saturday games in December. A Saturday game against the Philadelphia Flyers on January 28th at 6 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
Holy shit. Saturday, February 11th, Chicago, 9 p.m.
What? That's not real. Is that? is that real?
9 o'clock p.m.
That's going to be a party.
My God, that's going to be the drunkest crowd all season long. People are going to be pre-gaming for 5 hours before the game.
Hey, we complained that they didn't have enough Saturday night games, and if that's what it's got to be to accommodate TV.
I'm here for it. You love West Coast time.
I love it.
It's going to screw with the time zones for all the players. Well, interesting.
Well, they're both Central Division teams playing a Western time zone game. So
in the Central Division,
is that
in the Central time zone?
Got to do what you got to do, I guess, to get on national TV. And maybe they'll try it, see if people show up. I'm in for a 9 p.m. I think that's fun, but
I'll be there Saturday night at for sure. Listen, I've got more things to complain about than 9 p.m. at least on a Saturday night. Remember the 8:30 Wednesday game they had against Philly a few years ago? That was a little bit much during the week.
Saturday night, sure, 9 p.m. Do it.
So February will be good, though. There's that 9 p.m. game against the Blackhawks. Then they got the Stanley Cup champs coming in on a Friday night. Islanders and Kings, Sunday, Tuesday. Edmonton's a Saturday night game, 6 p.m., March 4th.
There you go.
And then one more Saturday night game, Saturday, April 8th against the Nashville Predators. So it's all up there right now. You can check it out. We'll go through it a little bit more on tomorrow's show. Okay, listen, before we get out, let's get to our horse picks last night. We were goosed last night. And I'm really spreading this out. These Wednesday especially, I find I'm going back and forth between the Blue Jays or whatever, watching it on YouTube. So here we go, Remo. Here are my picks. $2 on number 5 to win in number 1. Monstradamus. Great name. Race number 2. We're going with the 2-7 Quinella, Canadian Secret, and Give a Little. Race number 3. We're going to go on number 2, Fingertip to Place. We're going number 4 to win in race number 4. Number 4 is Wits Gato. I'm always a sucker for the Wits horses. Number 5, we're going to go on number 3, Zenhi to win for $2. And then we'll swing for the fences in race number 6. We're going to go with the $6 or $1 Triactor box for $6. 1, 4, and 5 Secret Avenger, Enhanced Furnace, and Sista of War. And then we got a couple bucks extra. We're gonna go with the 2-7 Quinella in the final race. Strong belief the favorite, and a bit of a long shot, King Wit. All right, what are you doing with your 20?
Yeah, it's enhanced finance, not enhanced furnace. I do
really?
have money on that. I don't know if the name influenced your picks there, but hey, I've been goose egged last night, goose egg pretty much all year. It's been a rough one. Last year was my rookie season, and I did very well. So
great beginner's luck. Now
the
it's all
gambling
coming back to
gods
roost.
are coming back to me. Yeah, exactly. Race 3, win 4, Kim's Texas Bling. We had Kim's Texas Bling in the first race of the season, and I did pretty well on that one. Race 4, I got a Triactor box, 145, River Deputy, Witsgato, and Cabo Dorado. And race 5, I've got a Quinella 7-8, Home Early Shirley, and True Kate. And my last one is race 6. I'm taking a winner. Race Enhanced Finance is to win. I have that one as well. So, there we go. Oh, we got some people saying stuff from Cheveldayoff as well before we wrap, and I know we'll get to this tomorrow. But BA Split writing in chat from Chevy, Cole Perfetti will not play in the World Juniors next month. So I don't think that's a.
Is anyone playing in the World Juniors next month? I mean, they're still gonna have that happen. I mean, I don't know. We'll maybe once everything dies down with the draft and free agency. And obviously, if there's any big news on the Hockey Canada situation, but all the sponsors have pulled out. I mean, I don't really know how this tournament's going to go on, and I certainly don't know how it's going to be received. Here's Mike's tweet. Some news from GM Kevin Cheveldayoff. Perfetti will not play in the World Juniors. He's just getting back to ramping up off-season training following injury. Team wants him to focus on that. Same with Chaz Lucius, who had ankle surgery. So, I guess a couple less reasons to watch the World Juniors in the middle of the summer. Of course, follow Mike. He's had a great bit with us today, and he's there with Cheveldayoff right now. So we'll have all the latest. We'll discuss what comes out of it today, and who knows tomorrow. Round 1 of the NHL Draft. Scott Billick's going to join us from Montreal. We'll also have Brandon Wicki talk a little bit more Bombers, and who knows, maybe have some breaking news about some trades heading into round 1 of the NHL Draft. Hey, before we go, Remo, some real sad news today. Former Winnipeg Jet defenseman and San Jose Sharks scout Brian Marchment reportedly passed away today, and I believe he was in Montreal getting ready for the draft with the Sharks staff. What an absolutely horrible story.
Yeah, that broke today with from Kevin Weeks, and 53 years old, his son Mason Marchment in the NHL this season with Florida. And I remember him as a defenseman with the Oilers. He was pick of the Jets, 17 seasons, Winnipeg, Chicago, Hartford, Edmonton, Tampa, San Jose, Colorado, Toronto, Calgary, and working with the Sharks and their AHL affiliate since 2007. So I can't imagine the Sharks organization having to do this draft when one of your scouts passed away there in Montreal. That is a extremely sad and tough situation for the family, and it's pretty shocking.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, he was born in 1969, so just 55 years old or so. Anyways, just a really, really sad bit of news today to pass on from the draft and the passing of former Winnipeg Jet and longtime NHLer Brian Marchment, as you mentioned. His son Mason playing so well with the Florida Panthers this year as one of the top teams in the National Hockey League. I can absolutely be sure that there'll be a moment of silence when things get going on tomorrow night for the passing of Brian Marchment. But did want to touch on that and just extend our condolences to the Marchment family and friends and whatnot on the very, very sad news today. Thanks again for everyone being with us, man. It was a great turnout today in the chat. Tomorrow, I'm sure will be the same, and Friday, with a lot of excitement around the first round of the NHL Draft. Make sure to join us tomorrow live at 1 p.m. In the meantime, if you haven't already and you're with us in YouTube, please hit that thumbs up button. Certainly helps us. And if you haven't already subscribed, make sure you hit the red subscribe button and turn your notifications on, and it'll let you know we're live tomorrow at 1 p.m. here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Thanks again to all the sponsors that make this show happen each and every day. And, of course, all of you for making us a part of yours. Have a great night tonight. We'll see you tomorrow for Draft Day on Winnipeg Sports Talk.
Oh my God! Oh! Shut it down! Let's go home!
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.